This is Senate Commerce. We're going to do the pledge first. Senator Susie, would you lead us? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you. Senator Waters, great to see you this morning. You're looking good. Why don't you
Good
tell us
morning.
your
Thank you.
districts? And I know you're next to my good
Thank you,
district.
Mr.
almost.
Chair, members of the committee. It's good to see all of you. And I'm here to introduce Senate Bill 331 relative to certain historic commemorations. This bill references a portrait of former Senator Martha Fuller Clark and also references the liquor bottles. I think I'll talk about the second part of the bill first because that's why it's in Commerce rather than ED&A where the historic portraits ones usually go. A little bit of background on the bottle part of the bill. About 10 years ago, a bill of mine restarted the commemorative bottle program, which has been lapsed for a few decades, and we used that funding from the bottles, working with the Liquor Commission to raise funds for the Historic Flag and Hall of Flags Fund. And we've been very successful in replenishing that fund and providing the money that was used to do all the work that's been done in the Hall of Flags and on for the flag displays. What we have done in the past is when a particular commemorative anniversary comes up related to a commission, the most recent one being the bicentennial of the State House, we have introduced a bill to redirect the funds for the bottle program for bottles created in that part of that commemoration so that those funds would go into the operations of that commission. It was a great help for the bicentennial of the State House Commission. And now, because we have, get this one, Sesquicentennial Commission on the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, although I see now that the federal government has decided to call it the semi-quincentennial. So take your pick on that. But that commission has been formed by legislation, and we have been meeting to plan our commemorations in the state for the Sesquicentennial. There was not funding attached with that bill that established the commission, so it seemed to make sense to do it for the bottles. And I think we'll probably have probably two bottles, I would guess, and they each have the potential of raising maybe $50,000 to $80,000, depending on the marketing and depending on the bottle design. The Liquor Commission has just done a fabulous job since we've restarted the program. So that's that part of the bill. And there is a fund that has been established related to that commission, and this I think will put us in good stead there. The first part of the bill really means a great deal, I think, to all of us in the legislature, and I think particularly those of us who are serving on the the Joint Legislative Historic Resources Committee. We have been making an effort over many years now through that committee to present portraits that represent people who have made contributions to the state and to add those portraits appropriately. And so the feeling was myself and the co-sponsors that you'll see, particularly conversations with Senator Carson, that the Martha Fuller Clark portrait would be appropriate for this. And as you can see here, a portrait had already been commissioned to commemorate her extraordinary service. And I know there are others who talk a little bit more about her service to the state and why I think this honor is fully appropriate for her. A lot of us, of course, I think everybody here was a colleague of hers in the Senate and understood her commitment to so many good things over so long in her career in the House. But I will say also that, you know, if you look around the state and see so many of the good things that have happened, whether it's the LCHIP funding, whether it's the planetarium, we can go down the list of, you know, how her citizenship has presented really, I think, kind of a shining model that extended far beyond what she did, particularly as a legislator. I will say as a a longtime member of the Joint Legislative Historical Committee. We've done a lot of work in the last few years to curate our collection of portraits. We've been moving some things around to make space and to kind of rationalize where certain portraits are going. And I think we saw last year in discussion of and voting, actually ended up being included in the budget, the inclusion of the Rogers Johnson portrait. I'm really trying to make sure that people who have served more recently are represented on our State House wall. So that's the bill, Mr. Chairman, and I'd be glad to take questions about either part of it.
So this is just one question. It's something I'd like just to have settled for me. And I know Martha Fuller Clark did so much more than I'll probably ever do for the state. If I do a little bit,
Oh, don't be so modest.
No. She was a very good,
Yeah.
but there was one thing, and it just, if you could clear this up for me, it would be one thing bothered me. And it's probably, and I know she was found not guilty when the 4 students who voted from out of state, if you recall, the Attorney General, they looked into it and they dropped the charges. I guess the court looked into it. You probably know what I'm talking about. The 4 students who were living there working on presidential campaigns, they were living at her house and they voted as in our New Hampshire election, which is allowed because we have loose domicile, laws and residency requirements. Was she aware that they were going to use her address as their home address? If that question was answered, I'm not a saint, so I'm sure I've done a million things more wrong than she has. But it bothers me if she was part of a voter fraud. And I just want this, I'm probably wrong, and you could clear this up for me. It would be a great relief for me.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I cannot speak for Senator Fuller Clark.
Okay.
I would say that what we can trust is the legal process, which found no such involvement. So I think that's in all
Okay.
cases we trust the legal process.
Yeah, no, they found her not guilty of anything, but it would bother me if she knew that there were out-of-state people voting in a New Hampshire election.
If she's not guilty, she's not guilty.
Okay, that's fine. I'm fine
Thank you
with
for the
that.
question. But
I understand, and I trust the legal process. I'm a lawyer. It's just one little thing that bothered me.
Okay.
In an otherwise impeccable record that she had in the Senate. So, okay, thank you for indulging me on that, and
Yeah, sure.
it'll stop there with me. Thank you. Senator Ennis, did you? No, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Waters.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, Senate Energy is meeting, and I'm going to kind of toggle back and forth.
Okay.
Your first 3 bills are mine. I've given my phone number to the aides so I can get called back in here to introduce.
Awesome. I thank you, and I understand
thank you.
your predicament. Thank you. Tim Horgan, Representative, are you in the room? He may be upstairs. Matt Flanders. Good to see you, Mr. Flanders. How you doing today? Doing well. Thank you.
I have a copy of my testimony. Should I pass that out now?
Don't trip. Yeah, he'll do it because. You're not close. Thank you. You're late. She will be here.
Good morning.
Introduce yourself to us. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Chair Gannon, and members of the committee. My name is Matt Flanders. I'm a state employee in the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. I'm the chief of the Bureau of Historic Sites. I'm here today representing Senate Bill 331A in support of certain historic commemorations. I'll read my testimony. Dear Chair Gannon and members of the committee, please accept this testimony on behalf of the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources regarding SB 331A relative to certain historic commemorations. My name is Matthew Flanders. I'm the chief of the Bureau of Historic Sites that manages Fort Constitution in Newcastle, New Hampshire. I also serve as the chair to the American Revolution Sesquicentennial Commission. The American Revolution Sesquicentennial Commission was established in 2022 under House Bill 1441 and is charged with organizing, arranging, and coordinating tributes to the American Revolution, culminating with a publicized event on July 4th, 2026, relating to the signing of the Declaration of Independence. In 2023, Senate Bill 103 added to the Commission's planning activities the raid on Fort William and Mary, which is now known as Fort Constitution. through a publicized event on December 14th, 2024. Senate Bill 331A will enable the Commission to collaborate with the Liquor Commission to manufacture commemorative bottles to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution under the Liquor Commission's Historical Fund Program in RSA 177:8. The proceeds from the sale of the commemorative bottles will be deposited in the American Revolution Sesquicentennial Trust Fund to help support the work of the American Revolution Sesquicentennial Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony for SB 331A. Please let me know if I can provide any additional information. Sincerely, Matt Flanders, Chief of the Bureau of Historic Sites.
Very good. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Do you want to go next, or?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Senator Donna Soucy, representing Senate District 18. Although I am certainly supportive of the historic bottle commemoration portion of the bill, the focus of my testimony is on the first part of the bill, the acceptance of the portrait of Senator Martha Fuller Clark. I had the privilege of being a freshman House member in 1990 and appointed to the Municipal and County Government Committee, and seated across from me was also a newly elected House member at the time, Martha Fuller Clark. And so began a friendship and collaboration that's lasted through the years. I think it would be we would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about Senator Fuller Clark's history as both a House member and state senator. She became a member of leadership in both bodies, rising to the level of Senate Pro Tem here in the state Senate. And at the time of her retirement, I did a little bit of research with the assistance of our research staff. And the breadth of Senator Fuller Clark's work is really worth noting. She sponsored an extraordinary number of bills. Over her career, nearly 3 decades, she sponsored and prime sponsored bills that became law, over 113 bills that range in topics from election law, funding for AIDS research, patient care, and certainly historic and cultural heritage here in the state of New Hampshire. Senator Fuller Clark's breadth of work has left, I think, an indelible mark on our state. She was also the co-sponsor of more than 623 bills that became law here in the state of New Hampshire. So over many, many years, she's had a prolific career and an extraordinary, extraordinary impact. For those of us that have served with her, we know that her and her unfortunately now dearly departed husband, Jeff, just extraordinary people, kind and philanthropic, and just really had a true love for the state of New Hampshire and an appreciation for it. I'd also note that the portrait, which is before you, was commissioned by a New Hampshire artist who was the portrait. It was Stoney Jacobs. Stoney is, I think, one of the most extraordinary portrait artists, not only in our state, but in the country. He did the portraits for Senator Shaheen, Governor Lynch, and a number of others that you will see around this building. I think the likeness is remarkable, and I would hope that the committee would accept the legislation and accept the gift of this portrait, because I think it's certainly worthy of being hung and enjoyed by those in the State House. And I would also note that over the years, I think several of us have appreciated the opportunity to see more women in portraits hung around our State House, particularly for our young 4th grade girls who are touring the State House to see the achievements of many New Hampshire women, and this is but one of them. So with that, I'd conclude my testimony and be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Do we have any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cynthia Timmons? Nope, I thought I had had a Cynthia Timmons coming up. Tana Clues. Nice to see you. Introduce yourself on the mic.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Timmons. I work for the health department. I'm a community service worker.
Very good. Thank you. Begin whenever you're ready.
Excuse me?
You're,
Here to testify on the legislation.
I had you signed up as speaking.
Oh, no.
And Senator Susie thought you were speaking, so, okay.
It was, yes.
Okay. We're all set then, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. That's okay.
Jennifer Goodman? Oh, this is Tana, okay, okay. I'm getting there, I'm sorry, Tana. It was a late night for me, I'm sorry. It'll be a longer afternoon though. Go ahead.
Good morning, Senators. I'm Tana Clues. I'm the CEO and President of the New Hampshire Women's Foundation. I'm very pleased to be here today. As you may be aware, the New Hampshire Women's Foundation invests in equality and opportunity for New Hampshire women and girls through research, education, advocacy, and grant making. The Women's Foundation is proud to support the legislature's receipt and acceptance of the portrait of the Honorable Martha Fuller Clark to be hung in the New Hampshire State House. The Honorable Fuller Clark has dedicated her personal and professional life to strengthening New Hampshire communities for more than 40 years. From advancing and defending women's health and rights to promoting gender equality and reproductive justice, it is fitting that a woman who gave considerable effort to increasing women in the halls of the State House would be represented in portraiture in the halls of the State House. An elected official for more than 20 years, Martha has consistently championed public policies which create opportunity and equality and improve the health of women and girls, including equal pay, family and medical leave, access to contraception, fertility care, and ensuring the protection of safe and legal abortion. In addition, Martha was the lead sponsor of groundbreaking marriage equality legislation in 2007 and legislation to prohibit discrimination based on gender identity in 2018. Martha was a founding board member of the Women's Fund of New Hampshire, the New Hampshire Women's Policy Institute, and the New Hampshire Women's Foundation. As recently reported in the New Hampshire Bulletin, Virginia Drew, the director of the State House Visitor Center, reports that of the 213 portraits in the State House, 9 are women and not one is a person of color. Representation matters. You have to see it to be it. It matters to the 4th graders on a field trip to the Capitol so that they can imagine themselves serving in the State House. It matters to constituents and members of the public so that they see their government is represented not only by men. It is our hope that the legislature will continue to hang more portraits of women in the State House, because it is our hope that more women, regardless of party, geography, or background, will serve in the legislature, and the women who do so should be recognized and honored like their male peers. The Women's Foundation joins legislators, leaders, organizations, constituents, and community members in gratitude to the Honorable Martha Fuller Clark's leadership to advance opportunity equality for women and girls in New Hampshire. We look forward to seeing Martha's portrait on the walls of the State House soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Tim Horgan, you never came in, did you? Representative? Nope. Does anyone else wish to speak on this bill? Seeing none. Could we accept this right now? Just put it right out. Do we accept? Yep. Let me close the hearing on this bill. Thank you. Motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Definitely thought you should. Motion closed. One day. Thank you, Senator Waters. Good. I looked up and you were there.
All
Go
set?
ahead,
Yeah.
Senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senator David Waters, District 4, to introduce Senate Bill 335 relative to alcohol packaging. Before I get into the details of this bill, let me first offer my thanks to the Liquor Commission, to the distributors, and to New Futures, and of course to Dover Youth to Youth, who has been very concerned about this issue, as you will hear. And I think the primary issue here is to provide clarity in the rulemaking process for the Liquor Commission and for the distributors and the brewers, because we have existing authority to ensure that products do not appeal to children. That's already in statute, but there arose some uncertainty about that. I think there's a broad acknowledgement among the public, the Liquor Commission, and among the distributors themselves that this is an issue that needs to be, the area needs to be regulated, and that New Hampshire has always cared deeply about marketing to youth or potential marketing to youth and a variety of projects, from alcohol to tobacco and others. But with packaging trends, it has become more difficult to provide the clarity that the industry needs. And particularly last fall, there seemed to be some confusion in the review process. I heard from the commissioners that they get, thousands of labels to review a year. And it is a very careful process. But, and money is being invested by the breweries and the distributors in labeling, and they need to know that what is likely to pass muster or what is not. So what I presented in the bill as drafted gets at a couple of the issues. The first place you'll see in 179.31, as I mentioned in 7, the existing language, and you'll see the attempts for clarifications there. That we're talking about packaging and illustration and labeling that is likely to induce minors to drink. So that, that's the existing statute, but then the clarity that the bill attempts to offer is including illustrations, subject matter, such as cartoons, toys, robots, fictional animals or creatures, likenesses of characters or phrases, or other attributes that are consistent with products marketed towards minors. You're going to have a presentation and testimony from Dover Youth to Youth, which will show you these examples, and I think you're going to be kind of surprised, and you'll hear from their own experience about why these are very problematic for youth who may find them appealing and not understand, and you'll see I think some deficiencies in the typeface and the presentation of notification of the alcohol contents and why this is creating problems for youth. Also, in the second part of the bill, addressing not just the labeling, but the advertising and the advertising restrictions that ought to be appropriate for their advertising that mimics or is likely to cause confusion with the commercially available trademark non-alcoholic products, including related to their logos, sound of the product, or brand, packaging, taste, appearance, and commercial impression are prohibited. Again, you're going to see examples of why this is something that needs to be addressed. The third part of the bill, I looked at, could we do something for an appeals process? Because now the Liquor Commission rules, and it might be that either consumers or child advocates or the industry is not particularly happy with that. And so I kind of thought maybe we should have an additional appeals process besides the existing one. That means just going back to the commission with more information. After drafting this, it's not exactly clear that it could work in this way because the New Hampshire Brewers Association pointed out that legally they probably couldn't serve on such a body because of the nature of their organization. But the intent there was to have Liquor Commission, somebody on the advocacy side and somebody from the industry. I leave it up to the commission and the industry and the others to say whether we really need an appeals process. Maybe we don't. Now, I'm sorry to take this bit of time to present this version of it, but I did want to also mention that there's been ongoing discussion with the distributors about the issues raised in the first part of the bill about illustrations, cartoons, toys, robots. You will see there are a lot of toys, robots, and cartoons on things that are, maybe more clearly for adults, but then there are some that are really, really close to what children are experiencing cartoons they watch and so forth. And so what the industry has discussed, and I will actually, I'm not supporting this amendment, but I will give you some language that I did receive from Scott Shire, courtesy to him, had drafted up. And what they are discussing is to not do that first part of the bill, which I think kind of resets us to a place that doesn't deal with the confusions over this, but then take a different approach to the advertising piece of it and the placement of the products in the stores. So I'd hope to have a, kind of a clearer sense of where to go, but then I decided that really, it's probably best to come into this hearing. You're going to hear a lot of voices from all sides, and then we can have some conversation. And I've been talking with the liquor commissioner and enforcement folks and the distributors about the need to, I think we need to do something. And I think that I hope that through the committee hearing process, we will get to some language. And I had some conversation with Chairman Hunt this morning as well. And I think there's a recognition we need to do something. And you're going to see before you and hear a lot of voices about how we come at it. I think there are two basic parts here. What are we going to do about the kind of labeling and the criteria by which the Liquor Commission judges labels, so there's more clarity in their rulemaking? And then secondly, the advertising piece and the placement of the objects in the stores. And again, I would encourage you to go to your local CVS or other store or elsewhere, and you will see what I'm talking about. You're going to have a presentation about it, but if you're in the store, you understand maybe a little more about why we probably need to do something. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Glad to take any questions.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
Would, our commemorative bottles that we've been talking about earlier today. Remember there was a canteen, I like those bottles. I've liked these type things since I was a kid. I don't know why. So would something like that canteen packaging be enticing to children? Would you be going after that? Do you remember there was a canteen a few years ago? It was one of the commemorative bottles. And again, I'm probably too into these commemorative bottles, but there was one, and as a little kid, I would have liked that bottle.
Yeah.
And so would something like that come under your packaging and labeling, saying, "Oh, kids canteen"?
Now, the Liquor Commission designed that, and they know this.
I know.
The existing statute.
Sure.
The existing statute says nothing is likely to induce.
Okay.
And I think that you would not be able to show in that example a long history of that image
Okay.
itself being used to
Sure.
market products like candy or cartoon
I was
characters
thinking
that
of
are
Boy
clearly
Scouts
for
with the
kids.
canteen.
Kids do use canteens, but you don't see that actual image of that kind of canteen being marketed to children regularly or habitually or primarily. And that's what we're trying. That's the difference we're trying to get at.
Okay. Would someone be grandfathered in if they've had a label they've been using for, say, 4 or 5 years and it's been allowed? Or would there be any protection for businesses who have, like, started 5 years ago, had a label, which is now found to be maybe somewhat inducive to?
I think
Sure.
that, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's a question for the commission about how they might handle something like that. But
Thank you.
I will say they have tried to be very careful about this all along because that's the statute.
Sure.
And they care about the labeling, they care about enforcement. We've run into a situation because of the proliferation of these products that there's some confusion and lack of clarity. That's what the legislation, I think, needs to address.
Okay. Yeah, there's one business that has a label, it's sort of synonymous with them. And that's what they built their brand around. And so to strip them of the label would be tough now. Thank you. Senator Innes, go ahead.
Just a couple questions, maybe a point. So labels, brands are designed to attract attention, right? And I'm familiar with a particular beer called Safe Spaces. I had to buy it. Unicorn, rainbow, glitter, right? So I'm imagining a child wandering aimlessly through the grocery store, encountering that can, and saying, "I want this." How can that child acquire the beer? My point here is, while it might attract the attention of the child can't buy it. The child can't consume it, can't use it in any way, shape, or form unless it's provided, say, by a parent. Is this really a major issue that will cause children to drink beer? Or is it maybe not?
Well, thanks for the question. what we try to, I think that what the commission and in general in child protection, and you're going to see the examples here, and you're going to hear from the youth to youth students about at a party, in a refrigerator, that these products are there and may be indistinguishable, especially the ones that are flavored and highly sweetened, that the alcohol taste might not be apparent, so that there is a sense that kind of confusion and the possibilities. But I think also that if something is pretty clearly marketed towards children in that image, that there is an attempt, and we've seen it with vaping, right? Through the, the flavoring and so on that were now being addressed in state statute at the federal level, there really was an effort to try to push the marketing down. Now, the success of some of that marketing, all we have to do is look at the Youth Risk Behavior Survey and see the high levels of alcohol consumption, higher than most of the states in the country in New Hampshire. And so, I there's a whole lot of cultural factors around this, right? And we can't legislate the world, right? But I think that there are some things that the common sense says that this one is probably really is something that is going to appeal to children. And that's important. We're trying to provide enough framework in the bill so that the common sense of the commission, whom I really trust their process, but they need a little more clarity from us.
So you probably remember, Senator, back maybe in the late 70s, early 80s, we had these unbrands, right? And I remember the beer can that was white with the black words, beer. Is that where we should go? How far do we go with this?
Thank you for your question. I think the clarity is here, the language in existing in statute that induce minors to drink. I mean, that's already statute, and I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
And then I think that the idea here, fiction animals or creatures, toys, robots, cartoons that are directed towards children, that there's a reasonable standard that we can create in statute. We're the policymakers, and I imagine, you spill enough beer, you got a lot of slippery slopes, right?
Yeah.
But I understand your point, but I think there's a reasonableness here.
I think what troubles me is how do we know, and how will the commission know that a particular image is directed at children? Because that seems to be the supposition here, that they're directing this toward children. And with vaping, that was clearly happening. I don't think our distributors, the retailers, the alcohol industry itself is directing this toward children. They're using marketing to try to attract attention to their brand, which is what businesses do. So I'm concerned about the subjectivity here. Unless we can prove, in my mind, that a particular label will cause more children to drink, I have real concerns about this. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, thanks for your question. I understand what you're saying, and I think that
And IU.
it's hard to avoid any subjectivity when it comes to regulation.
Right.
True enough.
Yeah.
I think we are able to provide some clarity and guidance. And we have also an appeals process.
Yes.
And so, and if you spend much time talking with the Liquor Commission distributors, you know that they generally want to do the best thing and they work together.
They're great.
I hate to be a skeptic, however, in that I think history shows that marketing often by intent, and I'm not casting aspersions here, but I will point to tobacco, I'll point to vaping, that we know that the development of future users of a product depends upon perhaps creating that brand identification and desire prior to the legal age of drinking. We're going to hear about that, about how these products are perceived and the problems that arise from the folks who, on whom it has deleterious effects. As I said, I don't, as much as I studied the Puritans for 45 years, I don't think you can, legislate every single morality or subjectivity, but I think that we don't throw our hands up. I think that there are reasonable ways to provide some guidance for the industry and for the Liquor Commission so that we all want to keep kids safe. And I think this is an area where we need to be a little better on.
Fair enough. I look forward to the testimony. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions? Seeing
you.
none, thank you very much.
Yeah.
We'll see
And
you again
again,
soon.
Mr. Chairman, I will be available, as others will be, the commissioners and
Okay.
the distributors to work on things.
I'm sure we'll be
Thank you.
talking.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator. Asen Chase? Chas? I gotta learn to pronounce names. I'll bring Dover Youth. Come on up. Hi, guys. How y'all doing today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. A little tired.
Too real.
You guys all probably have to get up wicked early for school too, so. My daughter's up at 6 o'clock every morning.
Me too.
Like she wakes me every morning. Okay, just introduce yourselves and go ahead and tell me where you're from and
Awesome. So, good morning. My name is Mia Mazzoni,
I'm Megan Merrigan. And I'm Daniela Summers.
and we're all members of Dover Youth to Youth. And Dover Youth to Youth, for those who don't know, is an after-school youth advocacy program targeting nicotine, underage drinking, and drug misuse. And we have about 50 members in grades 6 through 12.
We're here today to support Senate Bill 335 regarding the alcohol products that are designed, promoted, and marketed in a way that is unreasonably attractive to kids and teens. We would like to demonstrate to you why this bill is so important and provide some examples of our specific concerns. So, in general, we are concerned about the way the alcohol industry is marketing and promoting their products. And we feel that flavors being added to these alcohol products will downplay the harmful consequences that come for especially underage drinkers. For example, we have this slushy product. It is produced by Down East, and it's covered in a bunch of colors that make it look like an iced tea that you could get at a convenience store. And I know personally, me, when I was younger, I would love to get one of these on a hot summer day. But it also has a very high sugar content, making it taste like candy. And these two things combined will make it very attractive to kids and young teens. And if you were to look at the box, it mentions alcohol absolutely nowhere, even though it is literally an alcoholic beverage. And then if you were to look at the can, it's almost impossible to find where it mentions the alcohol percentage. You would need a magnifying glass that we definitely all have in our pockets right now just to see it, which is literally white on a silver background. So we're actually going to pass them around to you guys just so you can see how hard it is to find. But while you guys look at these, ultra sweet alcohol beverages, of course, they mask the taste of alcohol, which I don't really think any kid wants to have that nasty taste of alcohol. I think we can all agree they'd rather have it sugar coated, overall making it easier for kids to start drinking at a younger age.
And of course, we are also very concerned about alcohol packaged in ways very attractive to kids and teens. For example, we have this brand of beer from Concord Brewing Company that has cans designed like the kids' animated movie we've all seen, Finding Nemo. So on the side of the can, you can see it says, "How many clownfish can you find?" Almost like something you'd find at a children's menu at a restaurant. And this brings up the important question: what adult wants to, go around their beer can looking for cartoon clownfish? Probably very close to zero. So while we can't speak to the intent of the brewer, chances are they probably were not trying to get kids to drink, but the fact remains, this type of packaging is extremely attractive to youth. So we actually did write 2 letters to Concord Brewing Company on this issue, but we did not get a reply. And ultimately, we reached out to the New Hampshire Liquor Commission, and they got the brewery to discontinue using this label.
Another product sold all over our part of New Hampshire is Buzz Balls. These are small, colorful balls filled with a flavored drink that is actually 15% alcohol. We find these a problem because they're advertised on racks that are placed at the direct eye level of kids while looking just like a toy. They also have many different flavors, including one called Choco Milk that looks just like Choco Milk. And in a recent discussion with a friend at school, I mentioned these as something we were looking into as a group, and she said she's seen these in stores and always just thought they were soda because of the way they're advertised. And another concern regards the recent skyrocketing trend of adding alcohol to drinks or products normally consumed by and advertised to kids. For example, Sunny D Kids orange drink. I know I've had this when I was younger, and I know a bunch of kids my age have had it and loved it as well. As you can see, we have the regular version right here that we're all very familiar with, and then we have a vodka seltzer version. Now, just looking at this, it's pretty obvious they look very similar. We have the same colors, same patterns, and even the same fonts and logo. And this causes a problem because young kids may not notice the difference between them and can easily grab it if they see it in the fridge.
And while teens may recognize that this product has alcohol, they might choose it anyway. Speaking for many, many, many people at my school, they will definitely choose it anyway. Because if they're thinking about starting to drink, they're going to go to maybe Sunny D Vodka Seltzer because it's sweet, it's familiar, and it's approachable. It's not a huge, scary glass bottle of vodka.
There are many other examples of this problem. We have some here for you on this board, including the alcoholic versions of Simply Lemonade, Vita Coco, and over here we have the Monster Energy drink. You can see how very similar the logos and packaging are. For example, Simply Lemonade. You can see it's like the exact same logo, same lemon, and as a younger kid, I'd probably just think, hey, look, that's pretty cool. They put lemonade in the can. The Boston Beer Company has also recently collaborated with Pepsi to add alcohol to the very popular kids' drink Mountain Dew. We have these cans on display on this board as well, right here. Fortunately, it is not sold in New Hampshire, and the Liquor Commission has told us in a recent meeting that it will not be sold here. Now, can all these products be attractive to the youth? Well, yes, definitely 100% yes. For example, I'm only in 8th grade, and looking at the Monster packaging, again, here we have the original, and then we have the alcoholic version right here. I personally find the alcoholic packaging way more attractive. And if you think about it, if you're a parent and you're with your kid in the store, do you think they're going to go for something more plain and simple or something that would really catch your eye and has really attractive designs on it? And again, this causes a problem because young kids that already may be thinking about drinking, they're more likely to start and try a product just like this, especially since Monster is something even most kids have grown up with. And then yet again, it can also mask the alcohol taste, which no kid really wants to taste in the first place.
So another product we hope to keep out of New Hampshire is based on Eggo waffles, which of course are very child-friendly. In any of their advertisements, there's at least 5 kids, and we have some boxes for you. They've got emojis on the waffles. It's obviously very targeted towards kids. So what Kellogg's has done is they've allowed their Eggo logo to be used in a waffle-flavored 20% alcohol rum drink from Sugar Land Distilling Company. And we have that to show you
That's
now.
good. We're good. We get enough up here. It'll be a bad look for me with all these next to me.
We feel that alcohol companies should be much more responsible. Adult products should be marketed in an adult way, and in many cases, that is not what's happening. We know and completely acknowledge that alcohol is not going to be eliminated, and it will still have all these flavors and packaging. It's not just a matter of separating them in a store because they're still viewed by kids and teens in the store, but also at home in the fridge. Our goal is to prevent packaging and designs that are over the line and simply just too youth-friendly. We hope the final legislation we are here to support today will draw a line that eliminates designs that are just way too youth-friendly. We have been researching and working on this high-risk products campaign for the past year, and we will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. And we have sent many letters to a bunch of different companies during our research and advocacy efforts, and so far we have unfortunately not gotten an official response from them. And this is why we feel a legislative response is needed for this problem. And we do recognize that there definitely needs to be some guidance set in place for the brewers of where the line is so they can't accidentally cross that line.
Dover Youth will be continuing the momentum of this campaign with projects like radio and video PSAs, presentations to parents, and other advocacy activities to raise community awareness. We are asking for you to take action on Senate Bill 335 and prevent the exposure of these very attractive products to the youth of New Hampshire. Thank you for listening to us, and we would be happy to entertain any questions now.
Great presentation. You guys did really well.
Thank you.
I'm giving you an A for presentation. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, go ahead, Sandy.
Well, thank you I commend you all on your presentation, your speaking skills, and actually enlightening me because I did not know that this was happening. And I want you to know that I've received a lot of emails from our, breweries, and this is nothing like what they're doing. So what I would like to is, for instance, one of the breweries I heard from, it's a cute logo. It's not designed for children. It's been their branding for years. It's cost them a lot of money. It hasn't caused this kind of harm, if you will. So I'm hoping by the end of this process, this sort of thing can be addressed, but we can protect those breweries and their labels that they've had for a long time.
Yeah, of course. And once again, reiterating what Senator Waters had said, if they got their label approved by the Liquor Commission, they obviously know what they're doing. They know the stature that they use. So I'm sure if that brewer had their label approved by the New Hampshire Liquor Commission, then it should be fine with the legislation.
Thank you guys very much. Great
Thank you.
job. Anyone else have a question? Seeing none, thank you again.
Of course,
Appreciate your
thank you.
testimony. CJ Haynes from the Brewers Association. How you doing today?
Good morning, Chairman and
Thank
rest of
you.
the committee.
Just introduce yourself for the record.
I just want to make sure that was the first person you called Aaron Chase from Two Share?
You did.
Yes.
I think he didn't have the opportunity to speak yet.
Oh, okay.
So I was
He can
gonna
go
let him
first.
speak
Sure,
first.
then you can go next.
Yep.
That'd be great. Thank you. Morning, Aaron.
Morning.
If you could just introduce yourself for the record, that'd be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'm Aaron Scher, the co-owner of Two Share Brewing Company in Manchester, New Hampshire. I just want to start off saying that we are a small brewery. We employ local artists to do all of our labels. I just gave you a pile of our labels. The four that are stapled together were ones that were recently rejected by the Liquor Commission and then were later approved by the Liquor Commission. We've had 80 different labels created by our local artists, and over the 5 years we've been in business, we've paid them over $14,000 to produce that art for us. I have concerns that this bill will impact the local economy as well as my business if it is written, if it is passed the way it is written. Let's see. So for us personally, you can only buy our beer in our tap rooms and in craft beer stores.
Okay.
You cannot buy our stuff in a market or convenience store. When we're talking about some of these products that we just talked about, those folks would not be able to see those products. The art that we use and our local artists, that is part of our brand identity. You will see there are some photos in there, some labels that have my dog on them. I have my dog on my phone. You know, this is part of who we are. If we are no longer able to do that, that has erased 5 years of my company's history. So I have a lot of questions regarding this bill. So the first one is, what specifically is inducing the minors to drink. I don't think it is very clear. The person that will be making the decision at the Liquor Commission on whether or not art will induce a minor to drink, what is their background? Because right now, we, in our experience, they are kind of junior level employees within the Liquor Commission. And I would think that if they are making decisions like this, they should have at least a background in art, maybe in child psychology. What is the definition of a cartoon? Is it anything that is hand-drawn? Because all of our labels are hand-drawn by our artists. So I need clarification on that. What other like requirements are going to be in this bill? Because as written, I just don't see it as being very intuitive for us. If we've already paid our artists at the point that we submit the labels to the Liquor Commission. If then these labels get rejected, we then have to work with our artists, pay them again to correct it, submit it, where it could then get rejected again, and we're in this endless loop and spending a lot of money. So this is also going to impact our bottom line. This is going to impact the time to market on our new products. Will the Liquor Commission be going back in time and denying the labels that have already been approved? Right now, we have tens of thousands of dollars of labels in our inventory. And if we have to redo all of those labels, that can jeopardize the viability of my business. So I think I just hope that you guys consider these questions when we look at passing this bill, because this could really impact a lot of us small breweries. A lot of the products that we did just see are bigger companies that can absorb this cost, but someone like me, we might not be able to. So, thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Go ahead, Senator Susie.
Good morning. I just wanted to ask you a question about timing. Could you just talk a little bit about timing when you determine what type of beer you're going to brew and then how you're going to pair the label with it and how that would coordinate or be impacted by a decision of the Liquor Commission and what
Sure,
cost
yeah.
it might be to you?
So we might be a little bit more organized than some of my other fellow breweries. Me and our taproom manager and my wife, the other co-owner, at the beginning of the year, we will look at all the beers that we want to produce. We will contact our artists and decide which beer would fit that style of art. And they can start working on that art for us. We will pay them then for their artwork. When the beer is ready, we will submit the artwork to the Liquor Commission. And that process can go anywhere from just a couple days for the approval to a couple weeks. If that process is dragged out any longer, we could miss the ideal time to release our beers because there is a shelf life on these beers, especially on IPAs, that need to be consumed within, say, 8 weeks for the most fresh beer. So if we implement something, and as we experienced a couple months ago with those 4 labels getting denied, that can really impact our ability to get those beers to market. We have already brewed those beers. We've spent a lot of money on the ingredients. For us, a 7-barrel batch typically will cost us $1,500 to produce. And so if we are not able to get that beer out when it is at its freshest, and it sits and it's not good when we get it out, we won't be able to sell it, and then we've taken another financial hit.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Why don't you come up with the labels beforehand and get them approved? Why don't you do that way ahead?
So we need to know alcohol percentage, which are clearly marked on our labels, and we need to produce the beer in order to know what that alcohol percentage is going to be. I can have an idea of what that percentage might be, and there is a 0.5% forgiveness that we were given by the Liquor Commission. But that is not the way we do it. We want to make sure that we have the most accurate alcohol content on our labels.
Gotcha, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
CJ, can you come back?
Good morning again.
Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the rest of the committee. My name is CJ Haynes, and I am the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Brewers Association. I represent nearly 90 craft breweries in the state of New Hampshire. And over the course of the last several months, we've been dealing with this issue of what is constituted as a cartoon and illustration. And we've worked with the distributors, we've worked with the wholesalers, we've worked with New Futures, we've had numerous discussions surrounding this issue. And while we understand that this legislation is well intended, and by no means do our breweries have any sense that they're targeting youth in their labels, the concern we do have is that there are larger companies, as the youth group pointed out earlier, and those are an issue that is non-alcoholic versus alcoholic, and it's very difficult to discern the difference between those. I will note that the majority of those products that they showed you are not craft beer. They're FMBs, they're RTD cocktails, they're not actual, and they're not being produced by our craft breweries in the state of New Hampshire. I will note that it's important that the Liquor Commission already has rules in place, and to clarify that, it states right now, features, illustrations, subject matter, or other attributes that consist of with products marketed toward youth or children. And this was affirmed in a recent circular that the Liquor Commission issued earlier this year, well, last year, and then it was also issued 2 years ago. So the guidelines have been there, and that's already in the rules and regulations for the state. So I feel as though this would be an unnecessary step in that direction when it pertains to label illustration specifically. I do understand that there's concerns with packaging and the marketing and as far as where it's being merchandised. And this is a conversation we've had in depth with the distributors about. And many of our brewers actually do share the same concerns. For the example of Sunny D, Mountain Dew, Monster Energy, that was the first reaction when this bill came out, is that our craft breweries showed that concern and said, what about those type of branding? That seems to be their concern as well, and that is shared. I will also say that there is a significant financial impact that would ensue with this, not only to the craft brewers, but there are other industries adjacent to the craft beer industry in the state that would be impacted. Those would be the local artists, as well as label companies. We saw a decline in label sales last year based upon some of the rejections that were already happening. And there is one large major label producer in the state of New Hampshire to know. Additionally, I will say that back in 2010, 2012, there were concerns with youth and their consumption of energy drinks. And the trend is that alcoholic energy drinks, this is where the Monster Energy drinks and all of that were coming about. And in those conversations, a solution was brought forth. And what that solution is that because the alcohol content in some of those beverages was approaching 12%, and you add that to the caffeine level, it was detrimental to the health of children. What happened is that there was a law that was put forth that those energy drinks had to reduce the ABV of that alcohol content. So that means that they were brought down to 6% and lower, and that was the solution. The packaging did not change in those situations. It was not the artwork that changed, it was the alcohol content. So I think we're in the same situation now where we're looking at artwork as a means, as a solution, but I don't think that's the solution. I feel as though we need to do a better job policing and monitoring what is occurring and where the packaging is, where it's put in the liquor stores. And I will also say that all of our breweries are held to the same responsibilities of the New Hampshire State liquor stores and any convenience store, grocery store. They all must ID anyone that purchases alcohol from them. Additionally, I would like to say that when it comes to the approval process with the state of New Hampshire, it's going to be difficult for any of the employees of the Liquor Commission to become pop culture experts. That shouldn't be their job. Because also in 10 years from now, as you mentioned earlier, a canteen might not be relevant to students today or youth today. So in 10 years, it goes back to this conversation we had earlier as what happens when we have to go back to the labels that have already been approved. The other concern we have is that this seems to target craft beer specifically because there are wine and spirits that are being sold. There are baseballs and footballs at the liquor store where the alcohol is actually in those containers. And that would still be permissible because it's in a controlled environment. The same controlled environment exists at our craft breweries. I'd also like to point out that in a recent youth risk behavior survey that came out last year, in 2021, 21.3% of students said that they drink alcohol compared to 26.8 in 2019. That means there's actually decline in youth drinking. Further, 11.2% of students said that they were binge drinking in 2021 compared to 14.4% in 2019. Again, showing that there is a decline in alcohol consumption in youth. Further, with the National Brewers Association, you will hear, and the media, there was just an article about it yesterday, is that craft beer is actually on a decline for consumption. The millennials and Gen Z are the fastest declining group. They're not drinking craft beer. They're seeking FMBs, RTDs, and other seltzers. They're not focused on craft beer, and craft beer is actually losing market share with younger generation. So if anyone has any further questions, happy to answer.
No, seeing none. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
CJ. Have a great day.
You too.
Cora Long? Hi, Ms. Long. How you doing today?
Good, how are you?
Couldn't be better. Thank you.
I'm Cora Long. I'm from the Somersworth, New Hampshire region. I am a parent to a teen in the state of New Hampshire who lives in Northwood. I'm here to support this bill. I didn't prepare any testimony, so we're gonna fly off the handle here. I'd like to clarify that the data that was referenced in the previous testimony was based on 2021 YRBS. The previous year's YRBS was in 2019. What happened between those years was a pandemic where children didn't have access to alcohol. They were stuck at home, so that could be a reason for that decline in alcohol consumption with youth. I do want to say that these products do appear to be targeting youth. There was a reason why Big Tobacco got rid of Joe Camel for the similar reasons as to why this bill is being proposed. And just as a parent, if we can remove any kind of product that is appealing to our youth, like that jar of Eggo, my daughter actually pointed that out in the store to me when we were shopping and was confused as to what it was, and so was I. I did not know it was alcohol. So, you know, if I'm witnessing that happen with my own child, I would just rather products like that not exist. You know, in my mind, there's no need to have cartoonish characters on a product that is geared towards adults. Alcohol carries its own negative health consequences, similar to, you know, not similar to big tobacco, but it has its own consequences. And evidence-based research shows that the earlier you drink in your adolescence, the more likely you are to develop a substance use disorder. And with 21.3% of our youth reporting having drank alcohol within the past 30 days, I find that alarming, and that we do need to do something as a state to prevent that getting any worse. Thank you.
That was good. I like it off the top. Okay. Any questions? Thank you very much for your testimony. Lori Warnock. Good morning, Ms. Warnock. How you doing?
My name is Lori Warnock, and I'm a resident of Hampstead, New Hampshire. I am a poison prevention educator for the Northern New England Poison Center, and I'm drawing on my experience and expertise in that role. However, my statement is submitted as a voter, a taxpayer, and a parent, not as an employee of or representing the Poison Center. In my work as a prevention educator here in New Hampshire, I travel from Salem to Stewartstown, Claremont to Dover, providing poison prevention education to a variety of audiences. For the past 8 years, I have been invited by high schools, then middle schools, and now elementary schools to talk to students about vaping. As you must know, the use of e-cigarettes marketed in ways that directly targeted teens have undone decades of progress in reducing nicotine use. We as adults failed to put in place restrictions on this product until the horse was well out of the barn, allowing online sales, unlimited nicotine content, and flavors and packaging guaranteed to entice young users. We now have an entire generation of youth that will likely struggle with nicotine addiction into adulthood and face other yet unknown health consequences from a product that was marketed as fun, safe, and popular. I mention this because we're facing a similar situation and therefore an opportunity with the evolution of hard beverages, that is, seltzer and juice products containing alcohol. While White Claw and Truly and Mike's Hard Lemonade have been on the market for years, I'm particularly concerned about the sudden profusion of previously non-alcoholic beverages now available with alcohol and packaged similarly and easily confused with their non-alcoholic siblings. Products like Mountain Dew, Simply Lemonade, Dunkin's Iced Tea, and Sunny D, now available laced with vodka. Taking a page out of the tobacco industry's playbook, these products are targeting teens with fun-flavored flavors guaranteed to mask the alcohol. Bud Light Freeze Pops, anyone? Healthy messaging such as gluten-free, sugar-free, natural fruit juices. And social media influenced popularity. Adult reviewers on TikTok rave about the new Sunny D seltzer, capturing the flavor of a favorite drink of their childhood with the extra buzz of vodka. I'm all for adults reminiscing as they nurse a cocktail responsibly, but we know adult use and teen use differ dramatically. Teens tend to binge drink, downing 4 to 5 drinks over a short period of time, making these beverages hit dangerously hard and fast. Binge drinking puts kids at risk for motor vehicle crashes, assault, and alcohol poisoning. The most recent data from Monitoring the Future tells us that 15% of 8th graders, 30% of 10th graders, and 46% of 12th graders report alcohol use in the past year. Regardless of what the previous data was, whether this is higher or lower, those numbers are in and of themselves dramatic. It's no surprise that Senator Waters is a co-sponsor. I suspect Dover Youth to Youth encouraged him with some of the great educational material they've developed on these emerging products. Another piece of their outstanding work in peer education around substance use. I'm glad to see my representative, Mark Pearson, supporting this legislation as well. I hope you'll take this opportunity to prevent nefarious marketing of yet another addictive substance in teen-targeted flavors and packaging. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Do we have any questions? Seeing none, thank you again. That says. We're struggling with one name. It's very well written. It's like Cabell Hensley?
Isabel.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wanted to guess Isabel,
No,
but
that's okay. I know sometimes I have
you're
messy
beautiful.
handwriting.
It was just the first letter was throwing us.
It's a little cursive-y, and I blame that on my mom.
No, okay, it looks very nice though. Thank you.
All right.
if you can introduce yourself, tell me where you're from, and if you represent anyone or anything.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Isabel Wensley. I'm a board member of the U.S. Alcohol Policy Alliance and a research associate on 2 government contracts pertaining to alcohol policy, SAMHSA's STOP Act report to Congress and NIAAA's Alcohol Policy Information System. I'd also like to mention that I, like the members sitting in the audience, was once an advocate with Dover Youth, so I've been surrounded by substance use prevention since I was 12. And today, and for the past 2 years, I have been dedicated to translating alcohol policy research into practice. Today, I'm here in my capacity as a New Hampshire citizen to share my expertise and support Senate Bill 335 as it's currently proposed in the original language that you're seeing before you today. So, why do we actually care about this bill? Well, first, I'd like to note that alcohol is still the most commonly used substance by youth in New Hampshire today, and it has a tremendous impact on physical and mental health, school performance, and safety. In 2021, 10% of New Hampshire youth started drinking before the age of 13. And we know that the younger someone starts drinking, the more likely they are to develop alcohol use disorders when they get older. One of the proven ways to address underage drinking is by regulating products and marketing that are attractive to youth. Senate Bill 335 strives to address 2 key components around products. The first you've heard so much about today, which are lookalike products. Lookalike products, or products designed to mimic youthful, non-alcoholic beverages or food products, are concerning because alcohol brands already have a youth-appealing base, and it increases the likelihood of youth underage drinking. In fact, alcohol brands with youth-appealing advertisements are consumed more by youth than adults. And the brand recognition could also lead to an increase of drinking. And right now, there's no formal research on these new emerging high-risk products because they're so new. However, there's a concern at the national level about the impact of these products, like you've seen here today, such as Spiked Sunny D, Hard Mountain Dew, Dunkin' Donuts beer, and Eggo Sippin' liquor, which you can also see in Exhibit 1. Now, New Hampshire is in the perfect position to model legislative language to reduce access to these potentially harmful products before they impact youth. And that you can do that by passing Senate Bill 335. The second component are these youthful illustrations, packaging, and labeling. Now, to promote a healthy and prosperous New Hampshire, we must all work together to protect youth. And that comes in the form of regulating some of these illustrations, packaging, and labels to ensure they're not targeting youth. Now, what does it mean to induce the likelihood of youth drinking? Well, that means advertising in a way that is explicitly attractive to youth. Cartoons, toys, robots, and all of the other things listed out in the bill language as it's written right now are attractive to youth. In fact, in 1991, more than 30 years ago, research revealed that tobacco brands that advertised their products with cartoons were more likely to be used by youth than adults. Again, products that used cartoons, which for the definition that we're using today, is really just an exaggeration. A simple drawing showing the features of subjects in a humorous or exaggerated way, which you can see examples of different products in New Hampshire that are currently being sold in Exhibit 2. And so after the publication of this research, tobacco companies were prohibited from advertising using cartoons like Joe the Camel or Willie the Penguin. And this fact isn't well known. The research isn't well disseminated that 30 years ago this research was done. But that's not an excuse for us to sit by the wayside. We need to start incorporating public health research into our legislation. And there's no blame on the local breweries, right? It's just a lack of education and understanding of what public health advertising means. And it's time, again, that we bring this research to light and start implementing this into practice. And generally, what would be the outcomes of passing Senate Bill 335? Well, generally, we know what's good for health is good for the economy. Annually, excessive alcohol use in New Hampshire costs the state $959.9 million. $959.9 million. Those costs resulted through workplace productivity, healthcare expenses, and other costs such as criminal justice expenses, motor vehicle crashes, and property damage. Reducing underage drinking by reducing the likelihood of youth to drinking by reducing these products, which you can see in Figure 3, there's a logic model for you, will help reduce these costs in the future. And in conclusion, I'm urging you to put the next generation first, to give public health a necessary seat at the table, and to save New Hampshire in the process. But most importantly, I'm urging you to vote in favor of passing Senate Bill 335. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I just have a simple little question.
Yeah.
So one of the brewers earlier, we looked at his label. He has a picture of his beautiful black lab. It's not a cartoon, but it's a sort of, let's say it was a little more of a cartoon. Is that, kids love puppies, dogs. My kids, I've had 4 kids. They all want dogs every day. So is that going to be an attribute that's more likely towards a minor? Are you going to feel that dogs, puppies, kids, we can't have a dog on the label now?
I would say that from the public health perspective, we're most concerned about the dogs, puppies that are overly exaggerated in a humorous way. So a simple vector art of a black dog, think like the black dog logo,
Sure.
would not necessarily fall into that category of cartoon. What would be like, think of like the buffed up Joe the Camel. That is what we're talking about here. And that is what the research shows is likely to induce youth drinking. And I'd actually like to call out the Swole beer, which I think should be on page 3 of your handout. That is a perfect example of what we're talking about when we think cartoons. Overly exaggerated and incredibly youthful.
Yes, go ahead, Senator.
Thank you very much. Quick question, and just if you can, in your footnote number 7, there's an article by Payton et al. If it's possible, could you just get us a copy, either hard copy or electronic? Thank you.
Can I email those forward to everyone? I can include all of the attachments on there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
Senator?
Go ahead, Senator.
Good morning. Just a quick question. From a public health perspective, exclusively,
Yep.
wouldn't it make sense to just ban all alcohol advertising?
I mean, from a strictly public health perspective, yes. But we understand that there is a balance between economic development and that these are businesses and the fact that we need to protect public health. And so where is that line? We consider that line really targeted and focused on underage drinking and the prevention of underage drinking.
And I think we all agree with that.
Yeah.
The hard part for me is how these decisions are going to be made. And that's where it just gets messy.
And what I really like about this bill is it does allow a public health person from New Futures to be on that appeal board, to give that expert opinion from the public health perspective. And again, I think it's important that we consider the fact that, yes, the brewers are expert in making beer, but the public health people are expert in preventing youth from underage drinking.
But I think you can understand my perspective here because the public health position would be to stop advertising alcohol. My concern is we might be overzealous in our restrictions on brewers.
I would actually disagree with that assertion.
Okay.
So I think here we're really targeting advertisements that are explicitly appealing to youth. And now, why is that important? And what is appealing to youth? Well, we went over today that the cartoon pieces, those brands, particularly with tobacco in 1991, were more likely to be consumed by youth than adult. That means their market share was more than 50% underage people than adult people. And the same study, which let me find the exact citation, yes, the number 7, which you were referring to, this particular peer-reviewed article showed the same thing, where if there are youthful elements in an advertisement, again, that market share was shared more among youth drinkers than adult drinkers. So we have a responsibility, a collective responsibility, to make sure that we're holding each other accountable to help create a prosperous state. Again, we know the economic costs of excessive drinking, and that's primarily caused by underage drinking, because those who underage drink are more likely to become problem drinkers or drink excessively later on in their life.
Isn't it true, though, that this bill would set up a situation where we have adults determining what appeals to children?
Yes, but there's a lot of research on what that means, and I'd be happy to pass along a whole packet full of them. And if you simply search David Jernigan, he's one of the major researchers in this area, you will come up with more than 50 articles dedicated to what it means to have youthful, appealing advertisements for the alcohol industry.
As an academic, I'd want to test each image with children, see
They
how
have,
it appeals to them.
and that's exactly
No,
what they
each of the images that are coming
Here?
to, yes. I mean, that's the only way to know, I believe.
Well,
It feels very subjective to me, and that's my biggest concern with all of this. We're going to have people making decisions who aren't impacted by those decisions.
they are impacted by those decisions. They are impacted because we know that underage drinking affects the state. It affects the state's
Does.
safety, and it affects the state's ability to have economic development as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can you leave your contact information?
Yeah, I would
Sorry,
love to.
she
It's
has-
also
Senator
on
Sharkey has
all
a
of
question,
your pieces, and I'd be happy to do a more formal write-up as well to show this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The senator
I
has a
just
question.
wanted
yes,
to
of
address-
course.
It's more of a comment question. I see value and merit in your testimony and the other groups when it comes to these, the AGO and the Sunny D, but I am not seeing the same correlation with our local breweries. It doesn't seem to fit in to this bill.
And if I could respond, do I have time? Thank you. So I think from a alcohol research perspective, there are 4 main areas that we look at. Those are product, which is what we're talking about here today. There's advertisements or marketing or promotion. That's the second P, promotion. And then the third one is placement. And last but not least, price. So if price is low, youth are more likely to increase drinking. If there are lots of places to buy or consume alcohol, think liquor stores, think breweries, then we're more likely to have underage and adult excessive drinking. If there's a lot of promotion going on around alcohol, we also see an increase in underage drinking. And the more products that are youthfully marketed, again, we also see that increase. So it's about looking at each of those key areas and ensuring that we are at least doing the bare minimum to protect youth. And that's what this bill does today.
Follow up? We have a drinking age, 21.
Yes.
So you have to be 21 to purchase alcohol. So wouldn't it make sense to do other preventative measures because they can't go buy it?
Yeah, and I think that's a wonderful thing to bring up. And I'd like to say that, yes, we've seen a decrease in underage drinking over the past decade, actually, which is tremendous work. But we're still at 21% of youth in New Hampshire alone are underage drinking, and 10% started drinking before the age of 13. So the legal drinking age is 21. How are they getting that alcohol? Why are they drinking alcohol? These are public health questions that we're asking.
That's fine.
Okay. So I think you're concerned with the product placement when it's in the house. They see this attractive bottle and then they're gonna, even though they can't buy it and they shouldn't be buying it, but
Even
it's
if
gonna
they-
be there and they'll be attracted.
Correct. Even if they can't buy it, they're interacting and seeing it in stores. That exposure alone, alcohol marketing exposure to young people, particularly those that have principles that are appealing to youth, are likely to induce underage drinking by simply being exposed to those advertisements. There was a study done in Boston, which was a wonderful study by Dr. Michael Segal and David Jernigan, and I'd be happy again to pass that one along as well.
Thank you very much for your
Thank
testimony.
you.
I think we're all set. Kate Fry. Did I see Kate? She's long left. Okay. Oh, there you are, Kate. I didn't see her.
I was hiding.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kate Fry. I'm the Vice President of Advocacy for New Futures. I do have my written testimony and some more illustrations that I'm sure you'll love. I will try not to repeat what was said and just highlight what wasn't said and then pick up on some points that have been brought up. As you know, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that works in this role. We work really hard with stakeholders, prevention, and even industry partners to prevent and reduce alcohol and drug problems in the state and work to resolve health issues through policy change. I won't go over the data again. I'm glad there was some clarity to some distorted numbers earlier. I will say, which I always say over and over again, New Hampshire has some of the highest rates of alcohol use and binge drinking among our youth in the country. So even though, again, you may be hearing that it has declined, those numbers are higher than other states to begin with. And I don't think that's a great standard that we want to continue. We also want to thank Senator Waters for introducing this legislation. You've heard what this legislation has done. The genesis of this has come from those who know better than anyone else what is attracted to youth. I think this is what was kind of driving me crazy in this conversation. And I guess I agree with Senator Innes on this, is we're all talking about who's making these decisions and, you know, who will decide this. And no one is really listening to the youth. And in fact, if you listen to Dover Youth to Youth conversation about the multiple times they tried to reach out to folks for a response, no one responded to them. It took multiple times. It wasn't until there was an article in the Boston Globe that finally people were starting to listen to the youth. So instead of all of us discussing what's attracted to youth, let's include the youth in these discussions. So I'll get into that a little bit in the appeal process, how that can be done. As I said, New Futures was approached by Dover Youth to Youth and Senator Waters to provide language that would capture the concerns that you heard about today on all these different types of products. And actually what we did is section of one of the bill was really taken from language that was provided by the New Hampshire Liquor Commission very early on in some of the discussions around cannabis, if there were to be a state-run model and what would be allowed as far as and what wouldn't be allowed for advertising and products for cannabis. And that language was really just plucked from that. We kept hearing how we're concerned about cartoons and toys and products that are marketed towards kids. And so the language that we took was similar to that, but it was just a starting point. It's something that we can improve on with standards with alcohol. So that is something where that came from. I'm glad there was clarification about cartoons. And in general, cartoons are just not a good way to go with tobacco, with cannabis, with vaping. You've heard the study with Joe Camel advertisements. It really comes down to the identification of these products and what this might be long term. And the second section of the bill is these look-alike products, which I think we can all agree we don't need on our shelves in New Hampshire. There's just no purpose for them. If there's an adult that wants to buy a certain flavor, I'm sure they can figure out how to do that. We don't need things that replicate a product that's already out there that's targeted towards kids. But again, the last part of the bill, why we did not develop the language for an appeal process, we certainly encourage appeal process. Whatever process you come up with, there should be youth at the table. I just think that we can't continue to make these decisions with youth. I have two girls in their early 20s. They tell me all the time, I do not know what's attractive to youth. And when I pick out outfits for them, they say, I have no clue. So why don't we have the youth at the table? So I think one thing that we will point out is, and we've talked to the Liquor Commission a lot about this, is the products of the buzz balls. If you go into any liquor store, any Rite Aid, you will see products of BuzzBalls. They're the 15% product, 15% alcohol product in really bright colors. They're usually as soon as you walk in. And now their marketing standards are getting really, really smart in some ways. They now market these right next to the Beanie Babies. And so you walk in, you see the Beanie Babies, and then you see kids going right up to the Beanie Babies, and it just happens to be next to the BuzzBalls. When I was dropping my daughter off at Keene State College, we ran into the Cumberland Farms right across the street, and the first thing you saw was the 15% alcohol BuzzBalls. They're all over the state. I just don't think, and they come across very clearly as a toy. I've been told consistently by the Liquor Commission that they don't have the authority right now to pull these products, and this language could do that. Let's show that New Hampshire can do better. The other thing I wanted to say about the Liquor Commission that I really want to give them credit, they have been trying to do the right thing. They did meet with the kids. They did listen to their concerns. I think what we have to understand about the Liquor Commission is they don't have any additional people to review what I think it's 4,000 labels a month or something like that. So for every label that you might just have a dog that's not as much of a concern, you have labels that are more of a concern, that are, Mr. S'mores and other things that are being rejected, and that all of us would look at and say, that's not okay. So is there a way that we can agree on standards that the Liquor Commission doesn't have to go through all of these labels and reject so many of these if it was agreed upon ahead of time that some things are cartoons, some things are not cartoons? That was the intent of the legislation. To walk away and just say we don't want any standards at all, I don't think is a solution for that. It's certainly not to target breweries, but I don't think they should be exempt from the solution. And again, maybe it's a better understanding of what is considered a cartoon, so that the Liquor Commission doesn't have to review 4,000 labels and turn so many away when half of them are okay. And I know there's timing issues. There's only so much they can do in that amount of time. Again, this is where I agree with Senator Innes. I think anything that we have that has some kind of decision-making, we involve the kids. They know better than anybody else. There was an amendment that floated around, and I think it was alluded to that several organizations supported it. We do not support it. We see it as an industry straw man. It's something to just kind of deflect and say, try to get organizations to support it where it really doesn't do anything. So I would ask you to go back to Senate Bill 335. If there are pieces of the bill that we can make stronger to address the concerns of the breweries, no one is trying to certainly put the breweries that we all love in New Hampshire out of business. It's just that we want to kind of meet some common ground.
Thank you. Any questions? Make it a good one, Sunday.
So I guess I'm looking for a reaction to what I'm about to say. I've got some background in branding. I've been an expert witness a couple times on brand confusion and that sort of thing. The testimony this morning has led me to the space where I do see some real issues. The Sunny D was appalling. The can that looks like Monster. These are images and brands that children grow up with, as was pointed out by the young folks that testified. And they might be confused by this. At the same time, these products are in different parts of the store. I wonder if, moving forward, we ought to consider those cases where alcohol products have a striking similarity to products used by children growing up. And maybe that's the first step. How would you feel about that?
So you mean having them separate in the store, or having them
No,
not?
saying if you sell Sunny D orange juice, you're not selling Sunny D vodka.
I certainly think that's a start. I certainly think that's a start, because that would address some of these lookalike products that are out there. Absolutely. I also think that we have to look at things like, like I said, the way these things are placed in stores. strategically by the Beanie Babies. Also, there's one picture of
Yes,
a buzz ball where a kid is reaching one.
But then we're imposing action on retailers as well. This bill doesn't really get there. And that, to me, feels a step too far.
Right. And that's where that prohibition might be that first step to it, as you said, with not allowing those products to begin with.
Yeah, I don't know. I believe in consumers' ability to choose and parents' ability to keep alcohol out of their children's hands and the store's ability to make sure they're IDing. So I'm just thinking out loud here and interested in your response. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Fry. I think we have one left. Richard Kahn? Thank you for your patience, Mr. Kahn.
Richard Kahn, Hudson, New Hampshire. I have a bachelor's degree in computer systems engineering. I have a master's degree in education. I've worked as a substitute teacher, K through 12. I've done private tutoring, and I've been running a landscaping business for the last 22 plus years. What I hope to show with my testimony is, at the very best, this bill is not going to do anything to curb alcohol, and at worst, it's going to inconvenience or worse, the small businesses of this state. Now, we had some very articulate young people give testimony, so it's probably hard for you to picture me as a high school student. So I brought evidence. My high school yearbook, 1976. And where am I? Can't find myself. Okay. That's me right down there. I'll pass this around for anybody who cares. I have a mustache. I was one of the first people in my high school to have facial hair.
We're good. You know you'll trip.
Okay.
Don't come this way.
So what happened was I grew up in Sharon, Massachusetts, back when the drinking age in most states was still 18. And as those of you who are parents know, there's 3 ways you can do anything. You can either do it yourself, you can hire somebody to do it, or you can forbid your kids to do it. So, Dry Town, Sharon, the closest liquor store was 3 miles away. So I would get on my bicycle, ride to Caradona's Liquors in Canton, Massachusetts, and walk in with a little bit of a swagger, pick up a 6-pack, put it in on the counter, pay for it, walk out. And some of the guys that used to make fun of me for having that, dirt on my lip wanted, hey, dude, can you buy for us? Guys, I'm only 14. So this was before marketing was quite as advanced as it was, and social media and things like that. So basically, got my organized thoughts here. Degree in computer systems sometimes comes in handy. All right. I have not bought a lot of liquor since I was legally old enough to do so. My wife and I, we've been married over 40 years. We had liquor in our liquor cabinet that had been there since we were married, probably still be there today, except our son was studying culinary arts at one point, and he started cooking with it. Now, I've been exposed to alcohol since I was a young child. Being Jewish, we used it in various religious services. That's not why I cared. I cared not because necessarily my parents told me I shouldn't do it, but the law did. And that's what I see happening here. My parents always said, if you go to a party, there might be alcohol. And if you don't feel you're okay to drive, you call us anytime. We'll come get you. We didn't have cell phones. I had to do a landline. All right? So you forbid people to do something, they're going to want to do it. whether or not the label has pretty rainbow unicorns on it, like my granddaughters like, it doesn't matter. Okay? You're going to make it harder for businesses in this state to do business. Basically, these are my granddaughters. The oldest is going to be 9 in March. The youngest is going to be 5 this month. And the last people I would ask to protect them if they needed protecting would be, no offense, guys, the government. I do know if you forbid people to do something, they're going to want to do it more. Now, if you make it so people can't get creative with marketing, you're going to really stifle a lot of creativity in businesses, not just with liquor, but with anything. Oh yeah, one other thing. I forgot to mention I am the owner of U.S. Patent 9,358,583. A lot of the things that make a person creative are going to be stifled with this bill. The other thing is, and I'll give one example. Usually once a week, our older granddaughter would come over, spend the night with us. In the morning, we'd make pancakes, waffles, or something like that. And she would help me. And she said, Grandpa, what's going to happen? We were making the waffles, and she said, I wonder how they'd be if we put them, and she'd hold up the muffin tins, put them in a muffin tin and bake them instead. So I said, let's find out. Grease the muffin tins, pour some. She looks at me and says, I didn't mean right now. Very creative person. So as you're considering this bill, and a lot of people have given a very well thought out presentation, consider the fact that if you really want to stop, if there's a problem, some of the previous speakers had showed sample of alcohol containers of beverages that are not clearly labeled as alcoholic. If you're going to pass a bill, pass one that shows informed consent. Make the labeling of alcoholic content a little bit more prominent. But don't say, okay, this bill shows a cartoon s'more. I won't, one of the previous speakers, yeah, okay, that one, yes. Very clever. Now, does that make me want to drink alcohol more? Well, I'm old enough to now, thank God. But is it going to make a child want to do it? Well, how about parental involvement? Again, going back to when I was a young child. If you don't feel, Richard, that you're capable or not driving, even before I was old enough to drive, or whatever, if you don't feel something is right, you call us anytime. And another thing this bill does in a bad way is it absolves parents of responsibility with their children. That's basically it, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Do we have any questions?
Thank you for your time.
Have a great day. Thank you, sir. Does anyone else wish to speak on this bill? Sure. As brief as you can, repeating as little as you can.
I'll be brief, and I will not repeat.
Thank you.
My name is Dana Mitchell, and I'm from Dover, New Hampshire. I'm a retired police captain, full 26-year law enforcement career where I dealt with alcohol problems from my first day on the job there. I currently work part-time for the Dover Police Department in the Outreach Bureau and do substance misuse prevention work for the police department in the local schools. And I'm an advisor to the youth group and brought them here. Wasn't planning to speak. Just a couple of things. First, on parents. There's a flip side to the idea of parents, and there's a lot of parents out there that would like some help and support. They're trying hard not to get their kids to drink, and they would like some support from us. And it's frustrating as a parent to try to get your kid not to drink and then have it perpetually thrown in the kid's face as something that's harmless fun, a way to find romance, a way to find friends, in the way that it's largely nationally advertised. And as well as made to look, harmless because it's added to kids' drinks and drinks that you've been giving your kids. And that's very frustrating to a lot of parents. They would like our support. So that parent thing goes two ways. Secondly, on the brewers, I'm actually very sympathetic to the brewers in New Hampshire. I don't drink a lot. If I'm buying beer, I exclusively buy from craft brewer because that money is being kept in New Hampshire. It's employing New Hampshire people, and it's not feeding the national advertising frenzy that is really a large part of the problem. So I want the brewers to be successful because they're better than Budweiser, Coors, Molson, and Miller Lite and so forth in the way that they advertise. Our money is much better spent with our local New Hampshire brewers. But there has to be a line, and I'm very sympathetic to the senator's concern about subjectivity. And I'm not going to tell you I know what that answer is. I just know that there has to be a line where you can't do that. It's an adult product. Can we agree that we're going to require it to be packaged in an adult way? Can we start with there, and how do we find that line? Package it in an adult way. So if Moosehead beer has a moose on it, I don't think I care. Or if there's an animal somewhere there, I don't think that's the problem, particularly with a craft brewer. But there has to be some line where it's like, no, you've gone too far with that. And where is that line and how do we get there? I don't know, but we do need to find that. It can't be the Wild West where they just do anything they want. So how do we do that? And how do we do that where they have a chance to say, hey, I'd like to do a brand of beer and I'm going to have a skier on it but we're drawing that. And I'd be like, personally, I'd be like, oh, okay, that's skiing and alcohol. I'm not really a good mix, but that's probably not where I draw the line. But you have some, really cartoony thing. I've seen the Safe Space beer with the unicorns and rainbows and all that. The kids that are attracted to that, they're not going to buy that beer in Dover at Smiley's. But do we really want to attract the kids' attention to it? Is there any value in the kids being attracted attention to it being presented in a non-adult way? Or the Finding Nemo beer, to me, that crosses the line. How do we set up a line where the brewers have warning and have notice of that would be too far, don't do that, or some way of going to the Liquor Commission and saying, we had this idea of putting unicorns or rainbows on that and having say, yeah, maybe you better tell your artist to go somewhere different before they've invested their money in that. We want them to hire local artists. That's a good thing. There's got to be a way to do it. Yankee common sense needs to come into play here somehow where, no, you can't do that. That's ridiculous. Don't do that. And we work that out here in New Hampshire the way we do. So that's all. I just wanted to throw that out there that, parents, you have to be 21 to drink. You have to be 21 to buy a vape. But the vapes that have been made attractive, they're in the bathrooms at Dover High School. And any of these kids can tell you that. So if you set it up that the kids want it and seek it, they'll find a way to get it, even despite an age restriction. This isn't going to solve the problem, what we're doing here. It is not going to solve the problem of underage drinking, but it is a reasonable common sense step. However they get worded, a reasonable common sense step in the right direction that has gotten people talking about the problem. We're all here. So everyone's kind of has their awareness raised, and that's a good thing in itself. So I think it's been dropped in your laps, and I don't have anything written up to say, here, pass it this way. But there's got to be something.
Thank you, Officer Mitchell. Does anyone have any questions?
I do.
Go ahead.
And I ask this with all due respect, and I don't mean to be flip, but you mentioned that craft brews are made in New Hampshire. Are you aware that there are also national brands that are made here in New Hampshire as well that do employ New Hampshire
Anheuser-Busch,
people?
yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
That it just, Anheuser-Busch is quantumly different than the Concord Brewing Company, Woodstock, and you know, the people in Conway that are brewing and distributed. The way they advertise is different, and you know, the nature of the business is completely different. So, no, I'm aware that Anheuser-Busch is all over the country, including in New Hampshire, and you know, probably some others I don't know about. But that doesn't really change my perspective on the craft beers versus the way the nationally advertised beers. And I think if we can solve this labeling issue and just give them some good guidance and a chance to shop it by you first, and so they're not wasting their money on their artwork, there's a solution there. We just need to come to that.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Senator? You all set?
Yep.
Senator? Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
your testimony. Does anyone else? What's that? Senator Ennis, go ahead.
Just a quick comment. I want to thank the young people here who came this morning. It was an impressive presentation. It takes a lot to get up there and do that. And as someone who's been in higher ed for over 30 years, it was a damn good job. Well done.
Thank you very much. And that finishes whatever bill number that was an hour ago, 335. Okay, Senator Waters, are you here? There you are. You're always here. You might as well join the committee. Good to see you, Senator. We're an hour and 25 minutes behind. I apologize. Go ahead, so we're doing SB 330.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator David Waters, District 4, to introduce Senate Bill 365 relative to the sale or use of lithium-ion batteries for electric bicycles, scooters, or personal electric mobility devices. I want to give just a little bit of context why we need this bill. I do want to start, however, by thanking the fire marshal state fire marshal from whom you're going to hear, who has really been at the forefront of issues about lithium-ion batteries and helping the fire marshals all around the state get adequate training for what we're facing. So I think we have put together some good language, and I wanted to express my appreciation for his work on it. We are seeing a great increase in e-bikes in New Hampshire and across the country. They started out perhaps more bought by people for their recreational purposes. And now they are really expanding into becoming a transportation mode. They're good for taking cars off the street, of course, but also they're a good way for people to use transportation to work. And then also we've seen the increase in the use of cargo bikes, where you can not only carry a couple passengers, like potentially your children, but also you can run a business off a bike with a delivery service, or bring your tools, or, you know, if you go to some of our cities now, you see the kind of extraordinary use that they are being put to for commerce as well. I think, though, to anticipate this, to see what is happening now, but also anticipate their increase here, we have to make sure that we have some consumer protections in place, and also that we have some fire safety protections in place. I have been concerned and looking around the country at what other states and particular municipalities are trying to do to make sure they get ahead of any issues that might arise from fires from these batteries. Of course, there's also people looking at the electric vehicles as well, cars in that regard. So I looked particularly at some laws that were recently passed in New York City and out in Denver and some other places that have been kind of on the forefront of this regulation. So let me tell you how we decided to put it together. First, you'll see in the bill is that we needed to provide some storage, some definitions, which we didn't have in statute. And so that's why we have the definitions here of lithium-ion battery, second-use lithium ion battery. We did not have an actual definition of electric scooter in statute. We also do need that. Then after consultation, looking at other bills and then around the country and then consultation with the fire marshal, we thought to go at this in a couple ways. First, and this again follows some new guidance that has come out from the federal government, consumer protection agencies of making certain recommendations. And so the first thing to go at is to make sure that any battery that is sold or distributed in the state for these vehicles has to be certified. This is important because fires are exceedingly rare if a battery is certified, and they're exceedingly rare if the battery has not been damaged. And they're exceedingly rare if somebody hasn't presented a counterfeit battery or a repurposed battery as well. So what this section of the statute would do then is to say, okay, here are the standards you're going to make sure that are followed. And I think very importantly on line 2122, because as you hear from the fire marshal, there are other, for certain kinds of batteries, other underwriters' standards. And so the fire marshal would be best determine which ones can count here. We want to make sure that's on the package, and here's for the consumer. You know what you're getting, you know it's safe. And then, of course, the responsibility for this, if somebody has a fleet of these bicycles they're renting out and they're, as you see the scooters on the street, it'd be impossible for us to track down each one. And I think unfair if somebody's been renting out a bike for years and so on, to say that they're that. And the other difference here is that the person who's renting it for the hour or two, they're not doing the charging. The charging is being done by the business. And then importantly as well on the page 2, the second use. This is a problem that has been emerging in places where there's a lot of popularity and use of these bikes. So you're starting to see the second use batteries, and these, again, one would not have any idea whether they are, really certified and safe. So this is good to regulate that as well. And then for consumer protection, the last part of the bill, consumer protection, that if you're buying one of these, you will see that seal or that label is there. And then lastly, just as I was drafting this bill, apparently, people see there's going to be certificates, counterfeit certificates. So people are counterfeiting certificates, the underwriters' laboratory certificates, and so we need to have a penalty for that as well. So that's what the bill is. I think it's actually pretty simple. It's going to provide us with some consumer protection and help out the fire marshals so that we, have some sense of how to control any problem that might arise from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Do we have any questions? You're in luck.
Thank you very much.
Gene Toomey. Sean. Good Irishman. What am I doing to you, Sean?
I know, you're killing me. Yeah. It's okay.
There goes my St. Patrick's Day present.
That's right. Good morning, Sean Toomey, the State Fire Marshal. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. I think Senator Waters did an excellent job doing an intro. I'm not sure what he left me to talk about, but from the fire service perspective, this is a national concern at this point. EVs, which is a separate issue, but the e-mobility devices are also. Frankly, I think the e-mobility devices are a little bit more concerned to me because they're in our homes. They're in our apartment buildings and hallways. They're bedrooms, living rooms, whatever. They're being charged there, and when and if a fire occurs, they're more intense and they're much quicker, and it gives us less time to get out of our homes where I live. So I think that UL Underwriters Labs established some standards in around 2016 around these devices. This bill gets us ahead of the curve, I think, across the country to establish and require some of those standards to protect our citizens and visitors around fire safety. In 2022, late 2022, the Consumer Product Safety Commission really emphasized manufacturers, retailers, and anyone else to follow the standards. And then in November of 23, there was a Take Charge of Battery Safety campaign that was released, and it's a partnership with a bunch of the alphabet soups at the national level in the fire service and with FDNY around the issues they have had. But the number one thing on their list is choose certified products. And that's really identified as if we get certified products that follow a standard, then we're much better off. So I think this bill, as it laid out, it hits number one on that list as a national campaign, and I think it sets us up really well. We nationally, I will say, getting data on these occurrences is a little bit tough because our national fire incident reporting system right now doesn't capture it really well. So we're resorting to other means to get the data. We're working in New Hampshire to try to get those numbers right now, but we don't have great numbers. But I can tell you, nationally, they're saying it's around 2,000 incidents a year recently, around 600 injuries and just over 100 deaths related to e-mobility devices alone. So I think anything we can do to help minimize that would be a good thing. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Toomey. Do we have any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll get Sean right next time.
Okay.
Does anyone else wish to testify on 365? Seeing none, we'll close 365. What's that? Sure, we can do that.
Okay, make a motion
we're gonna-
to go into executive session.
Seconded by Senator Susie. Do I have a motion?
Ought to pass?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nays? None?
Move consent.
Boy, that's good consent. They weren't doing that in committees yesterday, so I'm very happy you did
I'll
that.
take it out.
Thank you. Okay, great.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll vote on consent. Do I have a motion on consent? Yes.
Yes.
Second?
Aye.
Aye.
And Senator Ricciardi will take it up.
Motion to come out of exec.
Second.
Okay, we are out of exec and we're into
3:30.
3:30. Let's see, is that you, Senator Perkins Porter? Good to see you. How are my restaurants doing in Portsmouth?
They're doing well. The breweries have a couple of concerns,
they might-
but
There you go.
restaurants are okay for today. Well, good morning, guys.
Morning.
So 3:30 is up first. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good morning. Nice to see you all. So for the record, I am Senator Rebecca Perkins Quokka from District 21. I represent Portsmouth and the surrounding towns. Today, I'm here to introduce SB 330, an act relative to allowing the ability to work from home to count towards unemployment benefits eligibility. I worked with Deputy Commissioner Lavers, who's here with me today to craft the language that's in front of you. A recent study found that as of mid-2023, 28% of working-age Americans spend their entire workday at home. Since the beginning of the pandemic, those numbers have increased significantly, with the number of people working remotely at home rising 400%. More people are working remotely than ever before, yet our state does not have a process to protect this large number of people who may only be able to seek employment remotely when they are unemployed. So SB 330 recognizes the reality of the modern workforce. This bill accommodates the many different ways citizens can contribute to our economy and reflects the changing nature of what it means to be employed in the Granite State. It goes without saying that this benefit can help our workers when they are unemployed. Our intent here on the bill is to make sure that and this bill and this situation arose out of a constituent story, and my constituent is here with me today, Joy Kurth, where, I think, and it's my belief that everybody who is out of work temporarily wants to be back at work. They want to be productive. They want to seek that employment, but there are industries where there are only remote positions available, or, remote positions should be able to count towards sort of the weekly application for benefits. And so our statute is drafted in sort of a stiff and unyielding way that really doesn't allow the Department of Employment Security the flexibility to approve weekly benefits claims if the only applications for jobs have been to remote positions. And so we want to accommodate the fact that remote positions exist, industries where remote positions exist, and to make sure that the department can establish the program in a way that accommodates that. So I know there's a long note in sort of the fiscal note or in the bill summary on this. I think that's important. I think the deputy commissioner will talk about this. I think my constituent will talk about it. But the intent, again, is to make sure that folks who want to get back to work can apply to the jobs that are available to them. And that may include remote work in some cases. So that's the big change. I'm happy to take any questions.
Go ahead, help yourself.
So, am I to understand that these folks presently wouldn't be eligible for unemployment benefits? That's sort of, I mean, I don't know.
I will let the deputy commissioner address that
Fair
in
enough.
full. I don't want to be inaccurate, but the previous language of the statute said an individual shall be disqualified for benefits for any week.
Yeah,
Weeks,
well,
part of which
'cause-
she's not available for work outside the home.
It says, but available for.
Yeah.
Right. So I might be working at home, but I could work outside the home, right? I mean, that would cover it.
Correct. And so just to address that point, the intent of this legislation and the language in front of you is not that people are not available to
Right,
work
right,
outside the home. It's just that in some cases in the industry they work in or their expertise, those positions outside the home are not available.
I mean, my brother and my brother-in-law both work from home exclusively, so I get where we're trying to go here.
Right. And, I mean, from my perspective, just as a reminder, remote positions can also be helpful to the economy in general because the wages could be coming from out of state into our state
True.
to put into our economy. So I think it's something
Unless you're a landlord.
we should
Okay,
encourage.
thank you.
Okay. Anything else I can answer?
No, we're great.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Dave Juve. Good to see you again. Just state your name and title.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Happy New Year. Nice to be back.
Happy New Year.
Sort of. For the record, my name is Dave Juve. I'm Senior Vice President for the Business and Industry Association. We signed up opposed to this bill, but I want to recognize that I think there is an issue that does need to be addressed here that the bill sponsor says is the intent of the bill. Our concern is a little bit due to the vague nature of the bill, which is leaving an extraordinary amount up to rulemaking. We don't know what that will look like, although we have full faith in the department. I guess my wish would be if you felt there was time to do this during the session, rather than executing on this bill immediately, if we could work with the sponsor, other stakeholders, and the department to provide a little more definition of what we're trying to do here. I think we would be a lot more comfortable with it. We do think the language needs to be modernized to recognize that how people work and how people are employed has changed, and it's not going to go back to the way it was. So we would like the opportunity to try and work on language that we could be more comfortable with. We're not opposed to the intent. I'm just more nervous about how this might play out in the real world. That concludes my testimony. Thank you.
Stephen Tower.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Before I start, I just want to preface this with, I was rather sick last week, so if I cough, I promise I am no longer sick, but my throat is still a bit raw, so. Stephen Tower with New Hampshire Legal Assistance. I'm the managing attorney of our Manchester office. So I found this bill very interesting when we saw the language in it. Just 2 months ago, I had an unemployment claimant come into our office seeking legal assistance. She was someone who for the past number of years, I think about 4 years, had been working full-time solely from home. She had worked 2 separate jobs in that period of time. And the reason that she began working from home was her senior mother needed a little bit of extra supervision to be able to remain in her home, age in place, and not go to a nursing home. So she transitioned to working from home for that purpose. She was laid off for no fault from her employer and applied for unemployment and was denied on the basis of RSA 282A:39, which states that an individual who was only available for work from home was not eligible for unemployment benefits. And she filed an appeal and contacted us, and I looked at the statute and I came back to her and had to regrettably inform her that no, as the law is currently written, you are not eligible for unemployment benefits in New Hampshire. And she felt that that was very unfair, and I sort of did too. It was really unfortunate. She was working in a field where she was completely capable of finding additional work from home employment. And in fact, she had, by the time she was contacting me, had found employment that she was going to be starting shortly, but she was not eligible for unemployment for the 8 weeks or so that she was out of work. I just thought that was very interesting. And the statute, as written, was written in 1981. Our labor market was substantially different in 1981. We didn't have the telecommunications and internet technology that we do now. I imagine in 1981, the only work from home that people would be able to do would maybe be piecemeal manufacturing or possibly telemarketing, fairly limited fields. So if someone was only able to work from home in 1981, that would really substantially limit the amount of work that they were eligible to apply for. It would probably be much harder to find a work from home job telemarketing for a company that maybe wasn't based in New Hampshire. But with the advent of the internet, I know people who work in New Hampshire and work for companies that are based other places. You could work for a work from home company based in another country, but you'd be working here in New Hampshire. So there's a lot of jobs that are out there that are available. As the senator testified earlier, a very large percentage of the working population now works solely from home. Personally, both of my parents work full-time from home. My mother is an office manager for a manufacturing company, has been working from home since 2009. My father's been working full-time from home, doing tech support since, I think, 2017, 2018. It's not just Google software engineers that have the opportunity to work from home. And surely not everyone can work from home, but it is a substantial opportunity and percentage in the fields of office work. People can do medical billing from home. People can do all sorts of writing and editing, do marketing and stuff from home. There are a lot of lawyers who work out of their home office now. So I do think that it would be great to address this statute and make this change to reflect the more modern work environment that we have. I do recognize the concerns that the BIA had about the language and sort of the vagueness around whether or not there's a reasonable expectation of substantial employment. I will say that the department already makes very similar assessments of reasonable expectation of substantial employment for things like work search requirements and whether or not someone is applying to, whether work is suitable. So if a ER doctor lost their job, the department does not immediately require them to apply for the gas station clerk job. They are first allowed for some period of time to see if they can find another job in a hospital, and only after some amount of time where that is not working out does the department say, okay, you need to broaden your work search to maybe things that were not immediately the most recent past work requirement that you've been doing. So I do think the department makes those assessments to some degree already, although I would be very happy to coordinate with the BIA to get them on board. I think if we can have unanimous support for language, that would be fantastic. And I'm happy to hear that they are interested in working on this to try to find a solution. And that's my testimony. Thank you.
You always have to make things simple for me. So I understand my wife works out of her house. My daughter's in Boston. Her company didn't want her to come in, who hired her out of college. They said, no, we want you working at home. So I understand that. So then they get laid off, right? And now say they get used to being at home. There might be a job down the road that they'd have to go work at. They don't want to do that. They want to stay at home. Do they have to take the other job that's now going to require them to commute? Or can they say, I'm only a work at home person now. I want a job where I work at home, and you're going to give them 12 weeks to find a job where they could go do the similar job, but they don't want to leave the home anymore.
As the law is currently written, if they are not available to apply for that job down the street, they would not be eligible for benefits. My understanding of as the language in this amendment is written, only if there are other jobs that are available that can be work from home, they would be eligible for unemployment benefits if they're applying to them. But if they are not applying to that in-person job down the street and there are not reasonable opportunities for them to work from home, which was their past relevant work history, they would not be eligible for benefits if they're just refusing to work from home and they're not going to get they're refusing to work anywhere but from home.
Okay.
And it's unlikely that they can get another job working from home.
I think I'm there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Let's move along here. Richard Lee Lavers. Oh, you know everyone, so it's easier for you. No. Yes, so you know the names better.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning. I think it's still morning. Yes, good.
Richard Lavers, Deputy Commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Employment Security. Senator just gave my last name a little bit more of a French pronunciation than usual, but it happens quite a bit. So
I went to St. Anselm, so I spent a lot of time on that side.
So first of all, the department has worked closely with the primary sponsor and would welcome the opportunity to continue to work with the BIA or other organizations that have concerns with how the precise language used to look at remote work opportunities is creating continued eligibility. So this is actually a provision in the unemployment compensation statute that goes back a little bit further. Mr. Tower talking about the 1980s. The 1980s doesn't sound that long ago to me, but this goes back to the original Social Security Act when the program was created back in the 1930s. So it is a provision that does need to be updated. I think the senator is looking to really propose a smart modernization of this provision. The way that it currently works, to address some of the questions that have been asked, and I think Attorney Tower did an excellent job describing it. So someone that comes in has a separation from employment, no fault of their own, and they're working fully remote, that separation is still going to potentially be qualifying them for unemployment benefits. It's when we get into continued eligibility, because the unemployment system, it's a week by week eligibility determination, and you have to be demonstrating to the department that you're able and available for work, and that you're adequately participating or attaching yourself to the labor market by looking for work, and people certify that each week when they file their weekly claim. So how it would come up right now in this scenario with this provision in our statute is that if the department were aware that the individual was limiting their availability to only work within the home or remote work, then they could be denied for those weeks in which they are limiting themselves in such a fashion. So it has, it does go back to really the piecemeal type work predating all of the technology that we have now that allows a more abundant remote work. What we do know about the remote work opportunities within the state, New Hampshire is actually one of the has a higher percentage than most other states of employers that indicate that they have some level of remote work. New Hampshire was second only to Colorado in terms of the number of employers that indicate some level of remote work, but still relatively low. It was 34% of employers indicated that they were planning to continue to have some level of remote work, either fully remote or probably in more cases, a limited remote. But that 34% is a much lower percentage in some of our service sector industries. If you think about hospitality and retail and healthcare and construction, manufacturing, those industries are about 50% of employment, of 50% of our workforce in the state. And remote work opportunities are very few and far between because it's just not practical for the type of work that needs to be done. So what the department was looking at and working with the senator here with the language was acknowledging that remote work is here to stay, that it's a reality, that it helps attract workforce to New Hampshire, and it's very much desired by some employers in the state. We still have situations where an individual is not going to be adequately attached to the labor market if they are limiting themselves to only remote work opportunities. And so that was the intent of the work that the department had done with the sponsor and putting in the language so that someone could limit themselves to remote work if there was a reasonable expectation of substantial employment, and that would be spelled out in rulemaking that the department would do. And we'd look at it, try to be precise in terms of those sectors where remote work doesn't provide a reasonable expectation of employment because there's not as much remote work available. That's kind of how we would approach it. Now, I do need to say the Unemployment Compensation Advisory Council that meets quarterly, they meet later on this month. They haven't had an opportunity to consider this bill, so they might take a position on the bill, in which case they'd be communicating that to the committee. And the department has also submitted this to the U.S. Department of Labor, as we always do, with bills that impact the unemployment system. We submit to USDOL for what they call a conformity review. I don't expect there to be any issues with what is being proposed here, but I can't speak for U.S. Department of Labor, and so that they will get us a response. We've asked for that response to be provided as quickly as they can. That will then be relayed on to the committee so that you're aware of if there are any concerns from the federal government with what's being proposed. But again, I think from the department's perspective, this is a very old provision in our statute. It comes up fairly rarely because in a lot of instances, the department is just not aware. Someone is conducting their work search, providing us information, it looks adequate, they're found eligible. But allowing or some recognition of remote work as being a viable attachment to the labor market in certain industries where remote work is commonly available, we think is a smart update, a smart modernization of the statute. And I'll stop there, and if there are any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Thank you. Do we have questions? Yep, go ahead, Senator.
Well, we're good. Thank you. I just have a question about when you're looking at continued benefits and people haven't yet gotten a job, not talking about remote work. Is there any assessment of commuter time or distance, either time or distance from potential employment?
Yeah, so there are several factors in the statute that we look at to determine whether or not work is suitable. Commuting time is one of them. So we look at two factors there. We look at what you had for a commute from your prior job that you were separated from. We also look at what are common commuting patterns for people in your area of the state as well. So both of those are taken into consideration for whether something would be, so if you turn down a position and that employer reports it to us and we have to determine whether it was suitable employment or not, that's some of the factors that we look at. We look at pay, we look at the risks posed by the type of work, and a few other factors as well, but that's one of them.
Thank you.
set? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Joy Kurth. Welcome. Thank you for your patience. You've probably been here a long time.
It's been an experience. Interesting, yes. So my name's Joy Kurth. I proposed to Senator Perkins Kwaka this story, basically. So I didn't come in with lots of data, but I'll tell you my story. I'm an IT executive. I grew up in New Hampshire since I was 5. I worked for Liberty Mutual for 11 years in New Hampshire in Portsmouth. I've lived in Portsmouth most of my life, or not most of my life, the last 20 years. I did do a stint overseas in Australia, and then I relocated back to San Diego. I worked for Intuit for TurboTax. I was one of the executives there. And then in 2018, I had the opportunity to open a retail business in Portsmouth called Society. It's an apothecary. It's a brick and mortar retail. And that is still open, thankfully, 5.5 years. So I've also been the head of technology for Bank Prov in Portsmouth. And more recently, my role was the vice president of technology at Ascendal, which is a fully remote company based in New Hampshire, required to pay into unemployment benefits for every remote worker that they employ. They only are remote, there is no office. I actually obtained this role when I was in California, staying with my mom as a snowbird in 2021 through my network here. So I was able to, my business is very seasonal, actually, I should say that. I don't work for my business, I employ people. So I've had the ability with COVID to be completely remote in the winter, and my mom lived in San Diego, and I went and stayed with her for several months. So in April 2021, I obtained this job, worked from San Diego for New Hampshire. My permanent residence is Portsmouth, and worked there until October 2022 when I was laid off. I initially filed for unemployment benefits at the end of December, January, because of my business, which is very seasonal. 95% of the business happens from like May-ish until the end of the year, and then there's about 5% in the winter. I keep my business open to keep people employed. Sometimes I pay out of my own personal salary to cover that during the wintertime. I was initially declined unemployment benefits because of my business. That's another bill to propose. They do not allow you, like the IRS does, to deduct expenses from your costs on a weekly basis, which you have to disclose what your revenue is. They don't allow me to take out wages of any revenue. So this initially declined my personal benefit for working. My salary comes from my business, from my employment. My business is still in startup mode, especially after COVID. And, luckily I survived all that. It is not something I can live off of. So what led us here is that because I work remote, or had been working remote, and fast forward or rewind a year ago, a majority of the jobs were still in remote phase. People were not back in the office. I was applying for remote work in order to expand my search. I have a huge network in California, and I attempted to go back to Liberty Mutual. I was one of 400 people that applied for one job, even though I know hundreds of people that work there. I was pulled out of the bin because of somebody I know. The reason why 400 people applied for that job is because remote people from other places are applying for jobs in New Hampshire now at companies like Liberty Mutual. If you go to LinkedIn, you will see every job. 500 people apply for this, 500 people apply for this. With AI, with all of the ability, the competition has actually gotten even more intense for workers in New Hampshire. So the assumption that I live in Portsmouth, I should be able to go get a job at Liberty Mutual, where I worked for 11 years, I think is a false assumption that there's a job sitting there waiting for me. I was able to get to the final interview and wasn't offered the role. So there is more competition. You're actually allowing yourself to exponentially expand your job search if you apply for remote work when you work in the tech industry. I'm not speaking to hospitality workers or people that have to be present. I then, as I had for the last couple of years, I wasn't working, had the ability to go visit my mother in California, stay there, decided to also network there for potential jobs. I worked at Intuit for 4 years. I know lots of people. Part of my previous role was about networking and jobs, so that would actually also expand my search. I went to unemployment, was told I was able to go there. This sparked a conversation now am I now a California resident? I explained to them I'm not. On February 26th, I was given my first denial, which the person on the phone and in the conversations told me it was because I was in California. I explained to them I'm not a California resident. I have not relocated. I'm just doing as I've done for the last couple of years. Consider it the snowbird concept. As long as you're in New Hampshire for 6 months and 1 day, I'm a resident of New Hampshire. I then started getting declined, not really clear. The people on the phone couldn't answer to me. And I'll pass this around as an example of the questions you have to answer. There is no question, are you applying for remote work on your weekly claim? And if you want to see that, you can see that. You only have to apply in order to be eligible to 5 jobs a week. I was applying to more than 5 jobs a week. You can click apply on LinkedIn. And then in order to get an appeal from unemployment, the documentation sent to me, which you'll see how many times I called, it became a part-time job, distracting me from my employment search, actually previously as well, to understand why I was being declined. Mind you, I'm also in San Diego at this moment in time. And the reason why it got triggered was because I applied for Work Now. There's a grant, if you're familiar with it, that you can get $6,500 to invest in yourself. And in that conversation, I then was getting declined for that because I was in San Diego. So I was trying to explain to them that I could apply for work there that's remote and still come back to New Hampshire, not shut down my business, not have to relocate. And that is part of what I was doing. That got misconstrued into I was only applying for remote work. I had actually had other conversations and explained to them, and I also should put a little caveat. The bill says work from home. I own a mixed-use property because of my business. I live upstairs, so my business and home address is exactly the same. Technically, I have an office in a commercial space, and I tried to explain that to them. And I still was, well, actually, I still didn't know until I had my hearing 5 weeks later, expedited, called Governor Sununu, called Jeanne Shaheen. That's why I'm sitting here. I got directed here eventually, trying to understand what this process was and how to expedite it for myself with this unemployment benefit. The expedited process took 5 full weeks before I got my hearing. And I thought this was about being in California. So I was trying to say I'm applying for remote work and can be based in New Hampshire. And I got informed at the end on a recorded line that I was actually talking about I'm declined because I was applying for remote work, and I was jaw dropped because this was the first news I even heard about this RSA. I'm not an attorney, and I don't think you should have to be an attorney when you're applying for unemployment. And it's quite disappointing to me. This is the personal aspect that after living and working in New Hampshire all these years, I'm going through this frustrating process to get, and this will be the next bill, a small amount of money. And that's when I was informed it was about the work from home, which is not on your weekly questionnaire. It's never stated. I called and spoke to, the people at the Portsmouth office will know my face. I've gone there many, many times when I was applying for unemployment benefits. None of them know about this. So I share that specific detail to highlight the application of this also gets the way it's currently written completely misconstrued because I don't think I should have been declined. Ultimately, they sent me this. I had another hearing. You need to be an attorney to represent yourself at these meetings. And I feel like you go into them being assumed you're guilty of not trying to find work instead of being supported through just a period of your time where you've lost your job. And you actually work for a company that was completely remote that you required to pay my remote benefits and now aren't giving them to somebody that my job search and to find a better job and keep my business open in New Hampshire is greatly expanded by applying for remote work. I think that is my story. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Oh, and I'll say, so I ended up
Yes.
having to lay off every single person that worked for me and then didn't ultimately even receive unemployment benefits in order to receive it. So there was an opportunity for how come that as a business owner, I got forced into that position to receive unemployment with the assumption that I'm the person working in my business, which is not the case. So again, pretty disappointing, which is why I took the initiative instead of just complaining to the universe and my friends and family who heard about this, that I feel like this is just, there's an opportunity to change. I think that the law is significantly antiquated and was put in place well before the tech industry became and enabled us all to work remote. And there shouldn't be the assumption that if you're applying for remote jobs, you're excluding yourself and you're trying not to get work, and you might actually be expanding your opportunities significantly in order to find employment. So, thank you.
Very good. Thank you for your testimony. Does anyone else to wish to speak on 330? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing. One to go. 436. Senator Perkins Quokka, good to see you again. You haven't gone anywhere, but it's still good to see you.
We don't see enough of each other on the floor, though.
No, not lately, but
All right. Okay. Well, thank you guys. Glad to be back. For the record, I'm Senator Rebecca Perkins Quokka from District 21. I represent the city of Portsmouth and the surrounding towns. I'm here today to introduce SB 436, an act relative to maximum benefits payable and unemployment compensation. So this bill amends RSA 282A25, which is currently a table. The table states weekly amounts of compensation and a cap on total compensation that one can earn up to a salary of $41,500. The amounts of compensation are set in statute, and that statute has not been updated since 2006. There are many pieces of unemployment compensation that can be debated. Many of them have come up this morning, and there are differing philosophies behind it, but I hope you can support this change for two very practical reasons. One is, I hope we all agree that when someone loses a job, what we want is for that person to be able to get back to work. That's what they want to be focusing on. And so making sure that we're engaging in adequate wage replacement means that they don't have to worry about losing their house, you know, taking their kids out of school, moving, taking their kids out of daycare. I mean, for someone, say my age, you know, a very average worker in our economy with children in place, it's a huge distraction and a huge upheaval, but I'm not the only one with the housing vacancy rate the way it is. You know, I think these are just kind of compounding problems that would come from inadequate wage replacement. So I think what we all want is to make sure that our residents can get back to work. And so I think that's one reason for us to sort of update the table that we have in our RSAs. The second is that it feels like the amount of benefits should not be set in statute. Making sure that we can kind of keep up with the times is important. That said, the deputy commissioner and I just had a very long and interesting conversation in the hallway. And so I think there are pieces about the table that could be useful. It may be that potentially keeping it in statute is helpful, or maybe putting it in rulemaking is helpful. Either way, a maximum wage benefit of $41,500, I think is just not accounting for a large majority of our workers and making sure that they have adequate wage replacement. So I think that we need to make sure that we're putting the tools in the hands of the department to ensure that our residents are getting where they want to go, which is back to work, staying in their home, their kids in school with their friends, or in daycare with their teacher that they know. And that, we as legislators are sort of making sure our statutes are keeping up with the time. So I think the last note I want to say on this is that, I had to kind of start somewhere. And so the language before you represents language based on CMS benefits and sort of how those are awarded on an ongoing basis based on wages. I am more than happy to work with anyone in this room if there are language changes that need to be made here to make sure that we're getting to the ultimate goal, which is just that all of our workers are able to rely on unemployment insurance as a short-term gap to keep their lives in place while they get back to work. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Questions? Nope.
Okay,
Good to see you, though.
thank you very much.
Have a good day. Dave, come on down.
Again, Chair, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Dave Juve with Business and Industry Association. Didn't say the first time I was up, and I know you're familiar with the IA, but we have approximately 400 employer members, and they employ over 90,000 Granite Staters. This bill gave me serious indigestion. I'm happy to hear from the sponsor that she may be willing to think of some changes that will accomplish what she wants to accomplish without the extraordinary price tag attached to this. I guess as a reminder, I'm pretty sure you're all aware of this, but as a reminder, New Hampshire employers pay into the unemployment trust fund. Individual employees do not. And that was by design. It's something we have never sought to change. In fact, we are on record supporting various improvements to the system that benefited individual employees. This was most notable during the 2008 recession, where the trust fund was quickly depleted. We agreed to language changing the trust fund that had a fiscal impact on employers, but it was important. The overarching importance is that the trust fund be solvent, and I'm pleased that the department manages that fund very well, very closely, and although our unemployment taxes don't compare favorably with a lot of states around the country, our trust fund does. I think we have an extraordinarily good trust fund, and especially when you compare it with some states that are still bankrupt from the 2008 recession. So we want to be very careful when we make changes that will impact the integrity of that trust fund. Having said that, if there is some need to adjust the weekly unemployment payout based on salary, we're willing to sit down with the sponsor and the department and see if we can come to an agreement on something that won't have a profoundly negative impact on unemployment tax rates. But what this bill does, which is all I had to look at, is pretty extraordinary. And I just want to point to one paragraph, or one line of one paragraph, that is on the second page of the fiscal note, and it says, under the bill, the minimum amount payable under the bill would not be less than 33% of the most recent statewide average weekly wage. This amount, as reported by New Hampshire employers in calendar year 2022, was $1,389. The minimum weekly benefit amount under this bill would be $463 per week and would exceed the current maximum benefit allowance. I don't feel that's sustainable. So happy to work with the sponsor, happy to work with the department to see if there is some compromise language that everybody can agree to. But in its current form, we can't support this bill. Happy to answer any questions.
Just if I may, maybe maybe this is better for the department, but do you know how long that maximum has been in place?
It is a better question for the department, but it's been a while. And if they said 2008 or 2009, that wouldn't surprise me, but they could answer that for certain.
We're all set. Thank you. I'm almost there. I get better glasses. Joy, do you wish to speak again? What's that?
I wasn't expecting you to call me now. Joy Kurth again. Yeah, I just want to, I don't need to share my whole story again, but just to say $427 a week, about 16, not even $1,700 a month is not reasonable in my opinion. I am an employer as well that pays into it. I believe it's around 2.9%. I think I even will speak on behalf of an employer. I'd be happy to pay more because I think to increase the viability and sustainability of the fund, that's important. But I was just trying to look up what Massachusetts weekly benefit is, but I know it's significantly more. The average rent is $1,300 in Portsmouth. That's average. Like really, it's more, probably 2,000. So it doesn't even cover basic bills for people when they're unemployed. I think it's also significantly antiquated. It seems like it's at least, again, I don't know. I thought your question was great, Senator Susi, about what year was this put in place, but it's an opportunity to revisit that, especially with inflation. So thank you.
Thanks. Richard, do you wish to speak again?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Richard Lavers, Deputy Commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Employment Security. So Senator Susi, just to address your question, the current max was set in a change made in 2006 and went in effect in July of 2007. So that current max, like has been stated before, is currently 427. And the manner in which your weekly benefit amount is currently determined is controlled by the statutory section that the sponsor had referenced. It contains the table, and in that table, and the instructions before that table, instruct the department to look at the individual's earnings in covered employment, so W-2 employment, in the 4 quarters of their base period, which is basically looking at their annual earnings before they had their separation. And then you look at the annual earning amount, and then you look a few columns over, and that tells you what the weekly benefit amount will be for that person for up to 26 weeks. So it's keyed off of your annual earnings, and the statute sets a minimum amount of annual earnings that you have to have earned in order to be eligible. And that's intended so that someone that had a minimal attachment, a little bit of amount of work, that they wouldn't necessarily be eligible for 26 weeks of unemployment benefits. So currently you have to have earned at least $2,800 and $1,400 in 2 separate quarters of your base period in order to be monetarily eligible. So you got to have that qualifying separation, so unemployed through no fault of your own, and you have to have earned at least $1,400 in 2 calendar quarters to be monetarily eligible. You satisfy both of those, then you're going to be initially eligible, and then we get into your weekly claim and continued eligibility. But as long as you're demonstrating you're able and available, and you're searching for work, and you're attached to the labor market, you're going to get that weekly benefit amount for the weeks that you file. So the mechanics of the statute are very important, right? So right now that determines what weekly benefit amount you get plugged into. With the bill as proposed, the sponsor's looking to establish a minimum and looking to establish a maximum. The department did the calculation on those. The minimum, as Mr. Juvea testified to, based off of the calculation of 33% of the average weekly wage in the prior year, would be about $465. Our current max is $427. And the new maximum would be just over $2,000, as that would be 150% of the prior year's average weekly wage. So some significant increases in the amount of weekly benefits that would be available. However, the mechanics of how you would be determined into what weekly benefit amount you would be slotted into, that would be unclear because the table is proposed to be removed. So I can't say precisely what the impact would be on the trust fund. We could assume that everyone is going to get the minimum of 465, but I don't know if that necessarily was the intent of the sponsor. But we can work with the sponsor on that, on trying to gauge what the overall impact on the trust fund would be. There are some other pieces of legislation that propose increases in weekly benefit amounts. And I can tell you that there's a bill in the House that would be more of a modest compared to this proposal, but it replaces the entire benefit table, and the net result there would be about a 50% increase in the amount of benefits being paid out. And the impact, as one might imagine, on the unemployment trust fund is significant. So right now, the unemployment compensation trust fund sits at about $395 million. And that's actually right about where it's supposed to be. We have an obligation to maintain the solvency of that fund. It benefits workers who might need to be paid benefits from that fund. It also benefits employers because a solvent trust fund reduces their overall liability to the feds for their federal unemployment compensation tax. New Hampshire has been fortunate over the course of the last decade plus, where the trust fund has maintained adequate reserves to pay benefits. When we look back to the Great Recession and following that in 2011, 2012, New Hampshire did run out of money in its trust fund and did need to borrow from the federal government, which the federal government will they will allow states to do. There's no impact on the individuals receiving unemployment. You continue to receive those payments. However, there are costs to the state for doing that. If you have a debt to the U.S. Treasury for borrowing to pay unemployment benefits, you do start to accrue interest if you have a debt after September 30th of that year. You also have the situation where employers start to see higher federal unemployment compensation tax rates as a result of carrying a balance of borrowing in order to pay those benefits. So the solvency of the fund is very important for a lot of reasons. So that should always be taken into consideration when looking at increases to the disbursements or the dollars that are going out of the fund. We want to make sure that the fund will be adequate, not only in a low volume unemployment time period like we're experiencing right now, but also in an economic downturn where the fund would be under a considerable amount more stress. So we want to make sure that that's taken into consideration, and be more than happy to work with the sponsor, with the committee, with anyone else on evaluating some of those costs that could be associated with increasing those benefit amounts. And just one last thing, as I had indicated prior, the Advisory Council for the Unemployment Compensation Advisory Council, they meet later on this month on the 22nd. They may or may not take a position on this bill, so the committee may be hearing from them with regard to this as well.
So I was working out in my head, the new max, based on the 1389 at 150%, puts you around $2,075. So that would be around the new maximum, somewhere in that ballpark.
Correct.
And what is the maximum right now?
427.
427 is the max, okay.
And that
So-
that 427 is keyed off of annual earnings of 41,500, which is about a 53% wage replacement rate. If 41.5 is what those earnings were. Now, if your earnings are higher than that, you're still at 427.
Okay, so this is like a 500% max increase.
A significant increase to the current maximum amount.
I'm there now. Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Two questions, if I may. First, are you aware, do any other states provide an index to their numbers, and is that based on wage inflation that occurs over time?
So the most common manner in which they do an auto adjustment, like the indexing, as you described, most states will key it off of the prior year's average weekly wage. And most instances are going to look at that full 12 months, although they get into some, and I'm sure there are reasons for the states in terms of how they key it off of different months, but it's usually keyed off of the average weekly wage. So, and those would make adjustments and then hopefully correlate well to what people feel is a reasonable wage replacement rate. Because we do know that when you get to too high of a wage replacement rate for your unemployment compensation benefits, that it acts as a disincentive to going back to work. New Hampshire has been fortunate where we have historically low duration, meaning people file for unemployment. Right now, the average duration is under 10 weeks, despite 26 weeks being available. My guess is the 427 max has something to do with that. But we learned during the pandemic, when the federal government was adding significant amounts to the weekly benefit amount, that did act as a disincentive for individuals going back to work. So it's a balancing effort in that regard.
And one more, if I may. Do you know what percentage of those that are currently collecting unemployment are at that max?
Yes. So when we looked at the actual filers for the first 9 months of 2023, which is the most recent data we had at the time, there were roughly 7,000 individuals that had received benefits, and just over 4,100 of them were at 427.
So well more than half, close to 60%.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gary. Good to see you, Mr. Abbott.
Thank you, Chairman. For the record, my name is Gary Abbott. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Associated General Contractors of New Hampshire. We're very familiar with the unemployment because I represent the commercial construction industry and we have layoffs. So we have employees who use the benefit. We have that concern, but we also, the employers pay because it's kind of a self-funded how the tables work. Companies that have more people that are in the system pay higher rates. So I just want to put that on the table. So we're always concerned about both sides. We want to be fair for the employee, but we also don't want to end up hurting the employers with higher premiums. So it's hard with these bills. I can tell you that there's this bill, there's a couple in the House that deal with changing the existing table. And I can tell you what our organization, we've already started reviewing these, and the common answer is, what's the impact for both? What's the percentage increase? What is the impact for employers down the road? A lot of these bills, we can't figure that out. On this bill, though, the high number is, all you have to look at is if people are getting paid 32 and go to 463 or 427 and go to 2,084 per week. Even I had trouble doing the 480% increase, not 50%, not 20%, 480. We know what that's going to do to the other side of the equation if people suddenly get that kind of jump. Now, the system's more complicated, and I think Senator Soucy brought it up, whether there's an inflationary for the future or something. And we know inflation has hit. I represent construction. Inflation for our customers, including the state of New Hampshire, is higher just on the inflation alone and employee costs. So these things need to be looked at. This is a dynamic kind of proposal. This bill looks at one piece. It doesn't kind of sit in a room like when we had the 2008 and employers had to figure out, okay, what's the way to adjust this? And we did that through a phase-in. This is kind of a similar situation. What's the fair amount? It's not a replacement amount. It's an amount to help them in their situation in order to find another job. And I think that is very important with whatever system. Right now, I recognize if somebody tried to fix the system within this session, most likely fixing the current tables, because everybody knows how that works, would be easier than a whole new system that this bill. And nothing wrong with the prime sponsor recommending a different system, but it would take longer. If this was to go in place, I would ask for like a study, and I'd want to look at the impacts and how it would work and all the dimensions in between minimum and maximum. So with that, it's clear that we can't support this at the rates it is. But we recognize that the system, I mean, you know, our organization is going, what's going to be the fair amount? We don't know what that is, and we're looking to the department. We've asked Assistant Commissioner as well. I sent him an email on some House bills. What's the percentage change? Because it's very hard to figure out when it comes to you as a bill like this, what's the impact? And that way we can try to figure out what the impact is for employers. So that's all that, speaking you here today, hopefully kind of plant the seed. I recognize by the number of bills, it's time for a change in the, how much the replacement or wage that they get on unemployment. But let's look at the whole, make sure we know the impact for employers. And with that, I would end my testimony, and thank you very much.
Go ahead. So given that the max salary amount is 41,000 that you're looking to replace, would it be fair to say that the majority of employees in the industry are making more than that today, so are probably likely hitting the cap if they're...
True, I would agree with you. I would agree, and I think based on the Assistant Commissioner's response of how many are at the max, but we still have to look at it as not a replacement of, it's for unemployed, you know, it's for, you're unemployed. All right?
Thank you.
I can tell you what it costs a week, but we can talk later. I just did the math. Big number. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Do you want to go first or let Richard,
Tower.
Dre Tower go? I just thought then he might say something that you want to respond to.
NHLA had not initially intended to testify on this bill.
Yep.
Because it does take a very different format than a lot of the other bills that we have seen over the years trying to address the issue of the weekly benefit amounts that claimants receive. I've been testifying on unemployment bills for NHLA since, I think, 2016, and I think every year or almost every year since then, there has been at least one bill that has tried to address the weekly benefit amount. It's something that we strongly believe needs to be addressed at this point. As was testified earlier, the current statute establishing the benefit amounts for the different brackets of earners was implemented and became effective in July of 2007. Since July of 2007, cumulative inflation's been 47%. It's a lot has changed in those years. I don't believe the current structure adequately meets the needs of households to not go completely underwater when they're unemployed for a short period of time. Every client that I have ever had at this point who is on unemployment, if they're not in subsidized housing, they will tell me, receiving unemployment, I can't pay my rent, what am I going to do? And I don't have an answer for them. Now, there's a lot of understandably competing interests with this legislation. Very understandably, employers don't want to see their expenses skyrocket. And I think all parties involved want to make sure that the trust fund remains solvent and available to meet the needs of New Hampshire's claimants in an emergency. But there has to be some way of improving the system to some degree to benefit households so that they can meet their expenses when they are temporarily out of work. And I think it would be great if we could establish some sort of committee with business experts and representatives and perhaps NHLA and other claimant representatives and the department to try to work out something that is effective and manageable and palatable to everybody. Having been looking at this for 8 years now, I'm a little jaded, and I hope that we can get there, but it's definitely a difficult process, and that's the extent of my testimony.
Thank you. Come on up, Senator. How you doing? Don't keep my chicken salad waiting though.
All right. Yep. You guys got to go. I know you have other things. I just wanted to say, I think that this hearing has brought out the right people in the room to have a conversation with. I appreciate everybody's input. I think we know there's an issue here. I hear that the solution in front of us is, is probably bigger than what we can ultimately work on, which is completely fine. But given housing costs and everything, I think some adjustment is needed. I mentioned I had a long conversation with the deputy commissioner. On the revenue side, perhaps there are some opportunities, perhaps there are some matching federal funds we could figure out, perhaps on some W-2 employees whose wages are significant, there's a little bit of opportunity to contribute a little more to the fund. I want to make sure we're like thinking about everything holistically. So let me see if I can convene a meeting, maybe a study committee, or maybe some revised language. I will give it a shot.
So my fear
Yes,
would be
please tell me.
two for the cost.
Yes.
So the top 4,100 people who stayed on it, the maximum people, it was
Yeah.
just those people, the 4,100 who are maxing.
Yeah.
If they went up to 2,100.
Yeah.
Not including the other 3,000, what
Yeah.
more they'd be getting.
Yeah.
was 7 million just for them per week, or
Yeah.
close, give or take.
Right.
My math's not perfect.
Which is a high burn rate for a
And so
fund.
that was not including those other 3,000, so we could be looking at 10 million more a week.
Right.
Just a substantial number that would be.
Right, and I don't know that that's our goal, but on the other hand, if we're providing a benefit that barely can cover the
Sure,
lowest
maybe
rent in
there's
the
something.
market. Yeah,
I'm sure you and
Yep.
Mr. Juve
Yep.
come up
We
with a
will-
great number in between.
collaboratively work on it. Okay,
Sounds
thank
great.
you.
Thank you. We are all set. We're gonna end the hearing. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Donna wants to adjourn, right? We're adjourning.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I'm saying yes.
Yes, yes.
I'm just-
2 yeses. She counts for us too.
Yep, Martha.